Chapter 1560. But now, a document had spread to every province in Yangtze. He had become a prince and the first in line to inherit the throne. After knowing what this meant from his teacher, Yang Chendong was not only unhappy, but he personally wrote a telegram and sent it to Yang Chendong. The meaning was not complicated. As a son, he missed his father. He wanted to see his father and enjoy the joy that Yang Chendong brought him when he touched his little head. As a son, he didn't want his father to take risks, because his father was his everything. As the son of a king, and a possible king in the future, he understood his father's approach. He wished his father a triumphant return and would wait for his safe return. But if things did not work out, he would take the initiative to start everything and fulfill Yang Chendong's wish to let the Han people stand at the top of the world. This telegram was respectfully sent to Yang Chendong by Beta Persei. After reading the contents of the telegram, Yang Chendong had mixed feelings. He sighed in his heart. His son had finally grown up. She couldn't help but murmur in her heart, don't worry. Your father won't be in trouble so easily. I will lead you to a higher peak. I will watch you get married and have children. I will watch the day you rule this world. Order, prepare to set off for Yunnan Manor. At this moment, Yang Chendong's face was full of high spirits. He wanted to set an example for his son. He wanted to make everything impossible possible. According to the news, the kings of the 3 provinces had already posted notices, stating that as long as King Wu Nan, Yang Chendong, was willing to condescend to the Southern Cloud Manor, the king of the 3 provinces, Zhu Huixian, would be moved by his sincerity. The 3 provinces might surrender without a fight and become part of Yang Chendong's territory. When the notice was posted, the local people were overjoyed. They had long heard about the treatment of the Han people in Yangtze's territory. Not only did everyone have a grain field, but they were also given houses to live in. Those with skills could also work in factories to earn money. It was said that many people who went there first not only did not have enough food at home but also had meat on the table during the new year. All of this was undoubtedly a fairy-like life for the ordinary people. If it was not because they were too far away or because the village officials and officials at all levels were too strict, they would have fled and sought refuge. Now, they could become a member of Yangtze without moving and enjoy all kinds of good policies. All of the people were naturally overjoyed and looked forward to Bugnam of Gojoseon's appearance in Yunnan Manor. Of course, most of the people did not think that Yang Chendong would be a threat once he entered the territory of the 3 provinces. From their point of view, Bugnam of Gojoseon, who could destroy the Mongolians and the surrounding foreign tribes, moved into Yunnan Manor. It was the same as returning to his own home. How could there be any danger? On the contrary, if Bugnam of Gojoseon did not come, it would mean that he did not want them and their lives would be in danger. In order to survive, they had to work hard to become the 3 provinces' army and fight against the 5-star army on the battlefield. It had to be said that Zhu Huiyu had the upper hand in public opinion this time. He was now using public opinion to threaten Yang Chendong and force him to take the risk to come to Yunnan Manor. Yang Chendong, who knew everything, could not think of a way to solve the problem, so he decided to take the risk this time. Naturally, this risk was very dangerous in the eyes of others, but in Yang Chendong's eyes, it was not a big deal. If he was forced into a corner, he could use the big warehouse. But before he was at the end of his rope, it was better not to expose his bottom line. He would not forget that from all kinds of clues, there was a pair of eyes staring at him in the dark. And before he found the traitor, it was best not to use his trump card. This was equivalent to an additional insurance. If he did not want to use the big warehouse, the 500 people who came this time must be carefully selected. Of course, Yang Heir volunteered himself and insisted on following him. Next was the 2,000 Black Cavalry, the Leng brothers, and the self-proclaimed elite warriors of the world's first cavalry army. However, there were only 500 people to follow. Even if the Black Cavalry had 2,000 people, how could there be anyone else's turn? Out of 2,000 people, only 500 could be brought. With a ratio of 4-to-1, all the Black Cavalry wanted to join. In their hearts, it was all thanks to Yang Chendong that they could have a good life and social status now. Now that their master needed them, of course, they would not shirk their responsibility. Yang Chendong handed this difficult matter to Beta Persei to handle. He believed that this young family servant would do his best to protect his safety. If that was the case, who would he bring along? He must be more nervous than himself. Beta Persei also lived up to Yang Chendong's expectations. After getting the power to choose the soldiers, he called for 2,000 black cavalry and held an internal martial arts competition in a small area. The first 500 people could follow. As for the others, if they did not seize the opportunity, then sorry, they could only stay here quietly. In the afternoon, 500 of the most elite black cavalry were selected. Beta Persei immediately transferred a batch of firearms to them. Then, under the worried eyes of the 5-star army generals, they went straight from Beijiang Prefecture to Yunnan Prefecture under the banner of Bugnam of Gojoseon. After Yang Chendong arrived at Beijiang Prefecture, Wang Zhanjiang, one of the 3 provincial generals outside the city, retreated with his army. He came on this trip full of confidence. The army of 150,000 looked like they were bound to invade the entire Vietnamese province. In Wang Zhanjiang's mind, he suddenly appeared in Vietnamese province and had the advantage of military strength. Even if he could not conquer the entire Vietnamese province, he could at least occupy half of it. However, he did not expect that Beijiang Prefecture alone would be able to stop him here. With the cooperation of the 1st Division of the Cold Front Division, he did not gain the slightest advantage no matter how hard he tried. He also did not see any hope of attacking the city. Therefore, when Yang Chendong appeared with the main army, he turned around and fled. Wang Zhanjiang's luck was very bad. When he led his troops back to Langsun, he was heavily injured by Jianghu of the 1st Division of the Cold Front Division, causing him to flee like a stray dog. On the way back, in order to make himself look less miserable, he even ordered his Kiliarchs to capture many able-bodied men from nearby villages to supplement the army. However, what he did not know was that among the able-bodied men he captured, 2,000 of them were from the 1st Division of the Cold Front Division. One by one, they disguised themselves as ordinary people and were scattered all over the place. Then, they were caught and found by the 3 provinces' army and brought back to the Southern Cloud Mansion in a grand manner. Although these 2,000 men were scattered among the various armies, they were already prepared. As long as Jianghu, as the commander, gave the order, they would immediately gather and do more things. The existence of these people was also one of the trump cards that Yang Chendong dared to enter Yunnan Prefecture. Since both sides had reached a temporary truce agreement, Yang Chendong had already set off for Yunnan Prefecture with 500 black cavalry. Naturally, they did not encounter any obstacles along the way. Moreover, the armies and officials of the 3 provincial kings would come out to greet them as a sign of friendship. This allowed Yang Chendong and his troops to get closer and closer to Yunnan Prefecture. In Yunnan Prefecture. At this moment, Zhu Huichuan's face was flushed and he was extremely excited. Previously, when he heard Mo Gui's suggestion, he did not think it was feasible. At least, if he was Yang Chendong, he would never take the risk to come to Yunnan Prefecture. Since he had a good chance of winning, why would he take the risk? However, Yang Chendong actually agreed and even appointed his eldest son, Yang Bo, as the prince. This meant that he was ready to break the hatchet and sink the boat. When Zhu Huichu thought about how long it would take for Yang Chendong to appear in front of him and even be controlled by him, then he might indirectly control the entire Yang family. His heart began to beat faster and faster, and it didn't slow down. In his excitement, he secretly mobilized the elite forces in his hands to get closer to Yunnan Prefecture. What he needed to do was to wait for Yang Chendong to enter the city and find the right opportunity to control him for his own use. In order to successfully complete this mission, he continuously mobilized the elite forces under him from the provinces and gathered outside Yunnan Prefecture. At the same time, he also sent out a large number of scouts to pay attention to the main forces of the 5-star army in the south of Langsun. Once he found out that they were acting strangely, he would use Yang Chendong as an excuse to immediately send troops to attack and take the initiative first. However, from the information he received so far, the main forces of the 5-star army were very obedient. They seemed to believe that Yang Chendong could succeed in the peace talks and did not have the slightest intention of moving to the 3 provinces. This made Zhu Huichun feel relieved, but at the same time, he cursed the stupidity of the 5-star army in his heart. 10 days later, when he learned that Yang Chendong and his 500 men were less than 3 days away from Yunnan Prefecture, Zhu Huichun called a group of his confidants to a secret room to discuss and perfect the military plan. Other than his number 1 think tank, Chen Tian, there were 4 of his generals present. They were General Meng Neng, General Wu Yingtu, General Zhang Jiang, and General Kai Wenju. Over the years, Zhu Huichun had been constantly developing and expanding his strength and had gathered a group of capable people. For example, these 4 generals were one of them. There was also General Luo Guan who guarded Yunnan, General Jiang Wuqing who guarded Guangxi, and General Bai Kuan who guarded Guangxi. In the secret room, the 6 of them met and Zhu Huichun took the lead to announce the final plan, which was how to capture Yang Chendong alive and not kill him. Of course, if Yang Chendong died, Yang Xia would fall into chaos. However, for the sake of benefits, Zhu Huichun did not want to see a chaotic Yang Xia. What he wanted was to use them for his own purposes. Even if he could not take over all of Yang Xia's territory, if he could take over a third of it, it would be a land that was much larger than the Great Ming Dynasty. Chapter 1561. Unless absolutely necessary, don't kill him. In the secret chamber, Zhu Huihua made the final decision. The other 5 people nodded one after another. After each of them described the situation on their side, Chen Tian finally said, "Your Majesty, there are 2 more things to report to you." "Speak." Seeing that Chen Tian was so formal, Zhu Huihua's attitude was also extremely serious. "Your Majesty, our people have noticed that the Shiping King's Mu family has been very active recently. I'm afraid that they will become one of the uncertain factors." Chen Tian reported the discovery of the Mu family as a big matter. The other party had been operating in Yunnan for many years. Their influence were spread far and wide. It was not something that could be wiped out in a few years. If they jumped out to cause trouble at the crucial time, it would cause problems. Zhu Huihua frowned first, then quickly relaxed and said, "It's fine. They will not cooperate with Yang Chendong. They would rather this person die here. We just need to keep an eye on them." This was not wrong at all. Yang Chendong was Zhu Huihua's enemy, so how could he not be the enemy of the Southern Ming Empire? The Mu family had been indebted to the Great Ming Empire for generations. If there was a chance to eliminate Yang Chendong, the biggest threat to the Great Ming Empire, they would not let it go easily. Therefore, most of the people from the Mu family came to kill Yang Chendong, and it was impossible for them to save people. Since Zhu Huihua said that he knew about this matter, Chen Tian did not say anything more. Both sides made the final arrangements regarding Yang Chendong's arrival. If they could not capture Yang Chendong alive, then they could only kill him. No matter what, this time, they would not allow Yang Chendong to leave Yunnan Manor alive. The news that Yang Chendong was coming to Yunnan Manor to negotiate with Zhu Huihua and peacefully take over Yun, Guang, and Gui provinces had long been spread among the people. In order to witness this great moment, all the Han people in Yunnan Manor were looking forward to it. Even the people in the surrounding towns were waiting for good news. To them, there was no better news than being able to survive a calamity without going through a war. After all, the people who would suffer the most in the chaos of war would be the people. 3 days later, outside the southern city gate of Yunnan Manor, Chen Tianzheng led a group of people to welcome the arrival of Yang Chendong's team. Zhu Huichun did not appear. Instead, he used the excuse that he was not feeling well to hide. This was what he had to be careful about. Mo Gui also reminded him that Yang Chendong was a very powerful person. He didn't act according to common sense. Don't get kidnapped as soon as you see him. If that happened, you would suffer a double loss. Regarding this, Zhu Huilu deeply agreed. In order to prevent Yang Chendong from having the opportunity to deal with or capture him alive, before the situation was under control, he would not meet with Yang Chendong. This time, he only sent Chen Tian as his representative. Yang Chendong's team came from afar. They were all dressed in black armor and black horses. Every one of the black cavalry had a saber at their waist and a firearm on their back. When the 500 people lined up neatly, they gave off the feeling of a magnificent army. He had long heard of the legends of the black cavalry's ability to fight, but he had never seen it before. He thought that the world had exaggerated their abilities. But when they faced each other, Chen Tian felt a strong murderous aura rushing towards him. At this moment, his expression changed greatly. He couldn't help but think to himself, it's only 500 black cavalry, but they already give off the feeling of a magnificent army. It's invincible. If there were 2,000 black cavalry, even if he sent out 20 or 30,000 people, he wouldn't be able to cause any damage to the enemy in a short time. Thank goodness, thank goodness. We only agreed on 500 people. It seems like Yang Chendong is also abiding by the rules. Chen Tian said in his heart, thank goodness, thank goodness. With a smile on his face, he quickly led his men to welcome them. Yang Chendong was no stranger to Chen Tian. They had interacted many times before. Thus, he recognized him from afar. But when he didn't see Zhu Huilio's figure, Yang Chendong deliberately pretended to be unhappy and asked, "What's wrong? The 3 provincial kings didn't come?" Although all of this was within his expectations, Zhu Huilu wouldn't easily show himself and wouldn't give him a chance to capture the king first. However, he still had to show his anger. Seeing Yang Chendong's sullen face, Chen Tian didn't know why, but his heart couldn't help but beat faster. He hurriedly bowed and said, "I'm really sorry. My king has been having a stomachache since last night. He hasn't recovered yet, so I can only come to welcome him. But please don't worry, Bugnam of Gojoseon. Once my king recovers, he will immediately come to see you." With an apologetic look, when Yang Chendong looked at him, Chen Tian couldn't help but avoid his eyes. After all, he was lying, so he was somewhat lacking in confidence. How could Yang Chendong not know that Chen Tian wasn't telling the truth? However, if he turned around and left because of this, it would be making a mountain out of a molehill. Moreover, he originally planned to enter Yunnan Manor. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to carry out his plans one by one. Alright, then please send my regards to the health of the 3 provincial kings. This king hopes to see him as soon as possible so that we can discuss the matters of the 3 provinces as soon as possible. Yes, Bugnam of Gojoseon's intentions, this official will definitely pass on your message to my king. Then, can we enter the city now? There are many people in the city waiting to see Bugnam of Gojoseon. Seeing that the matter was over, Chen Tian hurriedly changed the topic. Oh. Hearing that the people were lining the streets to welcome him, Yang Chendong's face lit up with joy. That's right, this king is really happy that the people are so fond of him. I'll have to trouble Lord Chen to lead the way. You're too kind. This is what I should do. Bugnam of Gojoseon, please. Chen Tian chuckled. After bowing and making an inviting gesture, he immediately turned around and walked in front. When he turned around, he intentionally looked at the armored general who was following beside him. This person was Wang Zhangjiang. On the surface, he was in charge of the safety of Yang Chendong's group. However, in reality, he was observing if there was a suitable opportunity to make a move. When Chen Tian was welcoming Yang Chendong, he was observing from the side. However, the result disappointed him. From the performance of the 500 black cavalry, Yang Chendong was tightly protected in the middle. If he had to make a move forcefully, not only would he not be able to gain any advantage, he might even let the other party escape in the chaos. This would greatly disappoint the king's expectations. Without even a 20% chance of success, Wang Zhangjiang naturally wouldn't make a move so easily. He decided to wait for Yang Chendong to enter the city before making a move. No matter what, it was easier to enter the city than to leave. At that time, the initiative would be in his hands. He inconspicuously shook his head, telling Chen Tian that the opportunity wasn't ripe yet. Chen Tian nodded his head discreetly, indicating that he understood. Then, he strode into the southern cloud manor. The two sides of the streets in the city were already filled with Han commoners who came to watch the show. In the past, they had only heard of how powerful Bugnam of Gojoseon was. There were even rumors that he had 3 heads and 6 arms. However, no one had actually seen what he looked like. Now that there was a chance to see his true appearance, who would be willing to let go of such an opportunity? Regarding the commoners in the city who were surrounding the two sides of the street, Zhu Huiyun and his subordinates discussed and didn't disperse them. After all, the commoners were the most insignificant existence to them. They didn't care about the so-called true public opinion. If they wanted to watch, then they could come and watch. This way, Yang Chendong would lower his guard. After all, with so many commoners watching, the other party would definitely think that they were sincere in negotiating. This would be beneficial to them. However, Zhu Huiyun didn't even think about it. He didn't even dare to go out of the city to welcome them. This already proved that he lacked confidence. How could Yang Chendong easily believe him? However, he was happy to see the commoners of the 3 provinces because he had already prepared gifts for these commoners. Yang Chendong entered the city. In front of him was Chen Tian and his men. They were responsible for opening the way and ensuring the safety along the way. Every 2 steps, there was a soldier from the 3 provinces guarding the place. They looked as if they were facing a great enemy. However, they weren't targeting the 5-star army, but the people from Shiping King's Mu family. They were afraid that their appearance would disrupt their king's plan. Yang Chendong entering the city was equivalent to entering Zhu Huiyun's pot. How he wanted to see it all depended on his mood. However, if Yang Chendong died here at this time, it wouldn't meet the conditions for him to maximize his benefits. Therefore, they could only guard against the Mu family's army. It was reasonable for the soldiers on the street to be so nervous. Although Chen Tian was walking in front, his attention was always on the people behind him. When he saw Yang Chendong entering the city under the protection of 500 black cavalry, he breathed a long sigh of relief. He was worried that the other party would leave without even entering the city gate. In that case, all the plans would be child's play. But now, the other party had entered the city, and everything that followed was no longer up to the other party. The black cavalry entered the city. Yang Chendong, who was riding on the only white horse, the white dragon, was greeted by the curious gazes of the commoners. At that moment, he also put a smile on his face, showing a refreshing appearance. But his lips moved slightly. Beta Persei, you can move now. Come on, it's time to distribute the flyers. In the future, everyone will be a family. After joining the Yangxia, all Han people must first apply for an identity certificate. Then, with the identity certificate, each person can receive 20 mu of fertile land. Not only that, with the proof of Han nationality, whether it's farming, business, or other things, you can be exempted from 30% of the tax. If you are willing to go to other provinces under the Yangxia, you can get more fertile land, ranging from 50 mu to 100 mu. Chapter 1562. Come, everyone, take a look. With your identity as a Han citizen, you can buy rice, grain, and oil at a 20% discount in Yangxia's territory in the future. Shouts and cries rang out one after another. The black cavalry, who were already prepared, took out the printed flyers and handed them to the commoners on the streets. In an instant, many of the commoners had such leaflets in their hands. Although some of them were illiterate, they could understand the language. When they heard the descriptions from the Black Knight Dragon Guards, their eyes were already dazzled. They looked at the leaflet in their hands and carefully put it away. They decided to go back and find someone who could read to listen to what was written on it. The Black Cavalry Dragon Guard's actions were truly beyond Chen Tian and the others' expectations. Wang Zhangjiang's eyes widened as he leaned closer to Chen Tian and whispered, "Lord Chen, do you need us to go and stop these people?" How could Chen Tian not know that Yang Chendong was trying to win the hearts of the people? However, a little impatience would spoil a great plan. There were so many people on the streets. If they were to make a move, the consequences would be unpredictable. If Yang Chendong were to escape in the chaos, then the loss would outweigh the gain. Chen Tian, who did not dare to take the risk, could only grit his teeth and say, "Let them distribute. As long as something happens to Bugnam of Gojosian, these flyers will naturally be useless. It's fine." Just like that, without anyone stopping them, the 500 black cavalry's bulging chests quickly deflated. The 100,000 flyers were all distributed. Yang Qindong smiled with satisfaction. He believed that after these policies were made known to the people, there would be a huge change in the hearts of the people in the 3 provinces. This would be very helpful in promoting the subsequent takeover of this place. It could be said that the first thing he did after entering the city was successfully completed. Finally, after passing through the long street, under the guidance of Chen Tian and the others, they finally arrived at a relatively independent courtyard with 4 entrances. Apart from a courtyard, there were no other buildings in the area. It was very quiet. Along the way, no one came out to cause trouble. The Mu family members who originally wanted to jump out also restrained their impulse to make a move. Perhaps they also knew that under the protection of a large number of soldiers from the 3 provinces, Yang Qindong also had the extremely elite 500 black cavalry by his side to protect him. In addition, there were so many people on this street. Forcefully making a move would not gain the slightest advantage. "Bugnam of Gojosian, this is the resting place that my king has prepared for you. Since there are too many of you, the 3-sectioned courtyard nearby will also be given to you. Are you satisfied with that?" Chen Tian asked with a smile. From his expression, there was not a trace of hostility. "Not bad, I'm satisfied." Yang Qindong smiled and nodded. Beta Persei, who was standing at the side, shouted, "Dao Shao, Ba Dao Jiang, lead the team in to investigate." Immediately, the 200 black cavalry dismounted and entered. After about a quarter of an hour, the 2 captains walked out and nodded at Beta Persei. Chen Tian was not surprised to see the black cavalry being so careful. He would not hide anyone in this courtyard. He did not think that such a lowly method would be able to take down Yang Qindong. Of course, it was not that he did not do anything. He also believed that Yang Qindong would be able to see through it, but there was nothing he could do. "Bugnam of Gojosian, you must be tired after such a long journey. Why don't you take a rest first? After that, someone will send food and drinks. Everything will wait for my king to recover before starting the peace talks immediately. Is that okay?" Seeing that the matter was settled, Chen Tian cupped his hands and prepared to leave. "Thank you for your trouble, Master Chen. I won't see you out." Yang Qindong still had a smile on his face. "I wouldn't dare. Goodbye." After Chen Tian said this, he turned to General Wang Zhangjiang and said, "Leave 1,000 soldiers outside the courtyard. They must ensure the safety of Bugnam of Gojosian. Without orders, no one is allowed to approach this place. Otherwise, they will be killed without mercy. Please rest assured, Master Chen." Wang Zhangjiang replied happily. When Yang Qindong heard this, the smile on his face grew wider. This was clearly an act for him. On the surface, it was to protect them, but in reality, it was just to monitor them. After saying this, Chen Tian turned to look at Yang Qindong and said with a smile, "This humble official will take his leave." Well said, well said. By the way, I will have to trouble you to send Dong Chuanfu and the others out of the city. Since I am here, there is no need for him to stay here. Yang Qindong made a timely request. Compared to Yang Qindong's importance, Dong Chuanfu was not even worth a fart. Chen Tian did not want to go against Yang Qindong over such a small matter, so he immediately nodded and agreed. After Chen Tian left, Yang Qindong also entered the courtyard. Then, he saw Beta Persei saying with an indignant expression, "Young master, this humble one just took a look. There are 2 courtyards and a total of 6 doors. 2 of them are front doors, 2 back doors and 2 side doors. This is really not easy to defend. Why didn't the other party find us a large courtyard with 5 courtyards? Why did they have to put together 2 courtyards? This is clearly to create a loophole in our defense." Looking at Beta Persei's angry expression, Yang Qindong waved his hand and said, "Just take care of the main courtyard. As for the rest, we will wait and see." How could Yang Chendong not see through the other party's tricks? If Yang Chendong was 99% sure that Zhu Huitong had ulterior motives towards him before, he was 100% sure now. Since that was the case, there was no point in saying more. Everything depended on their own means. It seems that the other party doesn't want me dead, but wants me alive. Interesting, his appetite is really big. Yang Chendong muttered to himself as Beta Persei left to make arrangements. He was very curious about how the other party would target him. He also wanted to see how long the other party could endure. After Chen Tian left the courtyard, he arranged for someone to let Dong Chuanfu and the others leave. Then, he strode towards the king's mansion of the three provinces. Zhu Huitong could no longer calm down and was pacing back and forth in the hall. When he saw Chen Tian, he asked nervously, "How is it?" "Congratulations, Your Majesty. Bugnam of Gojoseon has fallen into the trap. He has now been arranged to stay in the courtyard. General Wang Zhangjiang is waiting there with his men." As he spoke, Chen Tian began to talk about the situation along the way in detail from the moment he saw Yang Chendong. Zhu Huitong didn't care about the leaflets in the city promoting the Yang Xia policy at all. Yang Chendong couldn't even protect himself, so how could the policy be implemented? It was just a pie in the sky. There was nothing to be afraid of. What he cared about was that Yang Chendong had entered the city and lived in a courtyard with 6 doors. This would also determine whether the initiative was completely in his hands. Good, very good. After hearing that Yang Chendong had entered the courtyard, Zhu Huitong was so excited that his face flushed red. Then, he paced back and forth in the hall and said, "Chen Gonggang, if we take action tonight, what are the chances of success?" "This? If we capture a dead Yang Chendong, there wouldn't be any problem. After all, there are only 500 of them. However, if we want to capture him alive, it will be difficult." Chen Tian didn't answer immediately. Instead, he thought for a while before saying this. "No, this is such a good opportunity. Of course, we have to capture Yang Chendong alive." Zhu Huitong shook his head. With such a good opportunity, if they only let Yang Chendong die, they wouldn't be able to maximize the benefits. This was obviously not what he wanted. "Chen Gonggang, do you think we can think of something with the food? For example, poison?" "We can't. If we can think of this method, the other party will definitely think of it as well. They must have prepared many methods to check the food we send. Once they find out, they will definitely fight to the death. Unless it's absolutely necessary, it's best not to do this." Chen Tian hurriedly shook his head. The Black Knight Dragon Guards were elites. How could something as simple as poisoning really make things difficult for the other party? Yes, yes. This king didn't think it through. Zhu Huitong knew that he was too agitated and didn't think carefully enough. Then, according to Chen Gonggang, what should we do? Chen Tian was already prepared for this. When faced with this question, he almost immediately answered. "Your Majesty, Yang Chendong has just arrived, so he will definitely be on high alert. It's not appropriate to attack blindly. However, we can give it a try. For example." Chen Tian muttered into Zhu Huitong's ear. Zhu Huitong nodded continuously as he listened, his face glowing with excitement. In the courtyard, Yang Chendong sat in the main hall, reading a biography in his hand. This was the only copy that one of his subordinates found. It recorded some of the experiences and descriptions of the mountains and rivers written by a person named Wang Pu after his travels. There were many records about the 3 provinces. In the future, this place would become one of his territories. Of course, Yang Chendong had to know more about it. When Beta Persei finished arranging everything and entered the main hall, he secretly admired Yang Chendong in his heart when he saw him sitting there quietly reading a book. At this time, his young master was still calm. It was no wonder that he could conquer such a huge country. Seeing that Yang Chendong was reading, Beta Persei turned to leave. However, Yang Chendong spoke at this time. "Beta Persei, empty the row of rooms in the backyard. Someone will send something later." Just leave it there. Something? What is it? Beta Persei asked in confusion. He didn't receive any notice. This was Yunnan Manor, not Yangxia's territory. How could someone send something here? Yang Chendong suddenly raised his head and looked at Beta Persei. That gaze made Beta Persei's heart tighten. He suddenly thought that it must be an extremely confidential matter. His question just now was obviously superfluous. He immediately said, "Yes, young master. I'll arrange for someone to empty that place." Chapter 1563. After he finished speaking, Beta Persei turned around and left after seeing that Yang Chendong had no intention of saying anything else. Leaving Yang Chendong alone in the main hall, he let out a sigh of relief. Of course, he would not let anyone else know about the secret of Datsang, not even Beta Persei. Yang Chendong was very clear about the principle that if the emperor did not keep the secret, he would lose his minister, and if the minister did not keep the secret, he would lose his chastity. Ever since the king of Bangla was assassinated, he always had a feeling that an invisible net was covering his head, and he always felt that someone was watching him in the dark. Although he had wanted to trace the origin of this feeling, unfortunately, there was nothing, because this was just a feeling he had. However, Yang Chendong believed this feeling without any evidence. And before he found the traitor, he would not easily trust anyone. Of course, he believed in people like Beta Persei who followed him all the time, but he could not guarantee that the people around Beta Persei were reliable. In order to reduce the complications, it was better not to tell anyone. As for the row of houses in the backyard, Yang Chendong naturally wanted to put weapons there. This time, although the 500 black cavalry also brought firearms with them, they were very limited. This was especially true for ammunition, which was extremely lacking. And if they had enough ammunition, the 500 black cavalry would be enough to guard the small courtyard and prevent any enemy from advancing. It was dark. The 3 provincial armies sent food for the 500 black cavalry. Beta Persei brought Dao Xiao and Ba Dao Jiang to check carefully and did not find any problems. But for the sake of safety, they only sent a squad of 10 black cavalry to try first. After seeing that there were no adverse reactions after an hour of eating, everyone began to eat. Yang Chendong agreed with everyone's caution. Although he did not think that the 3 provincial armies would do anything because it would only prove the other party's stupidity, it was better to be safe than sorry. After the meal, the small courtyard became quiet. A total of 500 black cavalry, a total of 200 people were arranged to be on night watch. They were hidden in every corner of the 2 courtyards, showing the caution of the black cavalry. The black cavalry was not only strong in individual combat, but also had a good sense of obedience and loyalty. What was more, they were cautious. When they should be bold, they would charge forward; when they should be careful, they would be extremely cautious like an embroidered woman. It was late at night. The figure of the night watchman walked past the street outside the door and sounded the 3rd night watch. Not long after the night watchman walked past the street, hundreds of black shadows suddenly appeared from everywhere and began to gather outside the street. These black-clothed people were extremely familiar with the terrain of this street. They avoided the sentries of the 3 provincial armies one after another and arrived outside the small courtyard. Then, they gathered into a flood. From afar, there were about 150 people. Their footsteps were light, their movements nimble, their landing silent, and there was no wind when they moved. They were undoubtedly experts. As soon as they appeared outside the small courtyard, their footsteps did not stop for too long. Instead, they jumped over the wall and stood guard. They appeared to be in good order. Soon, the back door of the 3 courtyard was opened from the inside. A group of black-clothed people entered in a single file and quickly charged towards the 4 courtyard on the other side. Attack! Just as these black shadows did not encounter any obstacles along the way and arrived at the side door of the 4 courtyard, a loud roar suddenly sounded. Then, there was the sound of flames spewing out. Bullets flew out and covered the bodies of those black-clothed people. The black-clothed people were completely unprepared for this sudden attack. Just this attack alone caused at least 100 corpses to fall. Less than a third of the black-clothed people retreated in panic. However, since they were already here, how could they possibly let them retreat? Unknowingly, a row of black knights and dragon guards had appeared behind them. They had 2 light machine guns and the rest were Type 95. Just like that, they swept across the area. When the bullets landed among the shadows, there were screams after screams. Kill them all. Leave no one alive. Yang Chendong's voice sounded in the dark night. Unknowingly, he was already standing in the small courtyard. Beta Persei and Dao Shao were standing on either side of him. The gunshots did not seem to have any intention of stopping. In less than a minute, the last 50 black-clothed people had all fallen into a pool of blood. From the beginning to the end, they did not even have a chance to draw their swords. They did not even see the shadows of their opponents before they were all turned into corpses. Young Master is amazing. Beta Persei and Dao Shao looked at each other and sighed. Just an hour ago, Yang Chendong suddenly called them, including Ba Daojiang, and asked them to be prepared to face the enemy at any time. Sure enough, the enemy appeared. They were caught off guard and did not cause any losses to themselves. This was how Beta Persei and the others admired Yang Chendong. Yang Chendong was a human, not a god. Of course, he did not know if the enemy would appear or when they would appear. He only had an instinctive feeling that Zhu Huituan would not be idle on the first night. If things went wrong, he would launch a probing attack. That was why he called Beta Persei and the others to prepare. However, he took this opportunity to go to the empty house in the backyard. With his strength as a grandmaster, he did not attract anyone's attention. Then, the place was filled with all kinds of weapons and ammunition taken out from the warehouse. After everything was done, Yang Chendong could finally breathe a sigh of relief. With the existence of these firearms, anyone who wanted to cause trouble for him would only be courting death. The gunshots in the courtyard quickly attracted the attention of General Wang Zhangjiang, who was in charge of security outside the courtyard. He rushed into the courtyard with a large number of soldiers from the 3 provinces. At this time, the torches had been lit and shone on the corpses. What's going on? What's going on? Wang Zhangjiang, who rushed into the courtyard, instinctively pulled out his sword. This action immediately attracted the aim of no less than 5 black muzzles. This really scared him. He felt as if his whole body could not move at this moment. Put down your guns, Beta Persei strode over and said loudly to the black cavalry. Then he looked at Wang Zhangjiang and said righteously, General Wang, these people are all assassins. They wanted to harm Bugnam of Gojoseon, but we found them and killed them all. But I don't know how so many people appeared here. What are your people doing outside? This. Wang Zhangjiang did not know how to answer. Chen Tian did not inform him of this probing operation because he did not want to complicate things. So General Wang, who was completely unaware, did not know how to answer. Looking at Wang Zhangjiang's stammering and flushed face, Yang Er shook his head. Without waiting for Wang Zhangjiang's answer, he said, All right, since you're here, I'll have to trouble you to transport these corpses out. After speaking, Beta Persei turned to leave. At this time, Ba Daojiang came forward and whispered, Second brother, we've used up 1/5 of our gunpowder in this battle. If this continues, I'm afraid, let's go back and talk. Beta Persei glared at Ba Daojiang, then turned and strode away. And all this was seen by Wang Zhangjiang. At this moment, his heart trembled, as if he had understood something. Because of Wang Zhangjiang's arrival, the assassins' corpses were quickly moved out by the 3 provinces' army. Then the general went straight to the 3 provinces' palace without stopping. Chen Tian did not go back to rest. He was waiting for news here. After seeing Wang Zhangjiang's arrival, he and Zhu Huiqiu listened to his report seriously. After hearing that the 150 skilled assassins were all dead and did not cause any casualties to the 5-star army, both Zhu Huiqiu and Chen Tian stopped talking. They did not expect this operation to be successful, but at least they could injure some of the black cavalry. But now, it seemed that they had underestimated their opponent's strength. My king, Lord Chen, this general also heard some news. Wang Zhangjiang thought for a while and decided to tell them what he heard. Oh. What news? Zhu Huiqiu asked. Wang Zhangjiang wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. He was obviously shocked by the Black Cavalry's killing methods. He quickly calmed himself down and said, this general heard that the Black Cavalry used up 1/5 of their gunpowder. What? Hearing this, Chen Tian exclaimed. He took a step forward and asked Wang Zhangjiang with his face almost touching, General Wang, what did you just say? Please repeat it. Wang Zhangjiang was shocked by Chen Tian's action, but he still repeated what he said just now. Ha ha ha. After confirming that he heard it clearly this time, Chen Tian laughed and turned to Zhu Huiqiu. He clasped his hands and said, congratulations, my king. This time, we are 100% sure that we can take down Yang Qindong. Even if he is not alive, he is definitely dead. Ha ha ha, not bad, not bad. Zhu Huiqiu seemed to have thought of something and nodded excitedly. The Black Cavalry was powerful, but they only relied on their powerful firearms. Without the support of gunpowder, what was the difference between these firearms and firewood? Understood, continue to probe. At the crucial moment, we can put on a show. As for Yang Qindong, we can just push all the blame to the Shiping Palace. Through this test, Zhu Huichun had more confidence in his heart, and he immediately spoke of the next step of the plan. This also caused Chen Tian, who was standing at the side, to nod his head repeatedly. Then, he said, Your Majesty is wise. That was an earth-shattering flattery. It was as if at this moment, they could already see Yang Qindong being heavily surrounded and at the end of his rope. Chapter 1564. In the courtyard. Beta Persei reported to Yang Qindong, especially what Ba Daojiang said just now. Then he said with a puzzled look, Young master, why do we have to inform the enemy that we don't have enough ammunition? Yang Qindong smiled lightly when he heard this and said, if we don't tell the enemy, how can they jump over the wall? Young master has too many things to do, so I won't waste too much time here. The sooner they make a move, the better. Beta Persei showed an expression of understanding after hearing this, but then he said with a sad face, but young master, we really don't have much ammunition. Everyone is riding on warhorses, and their equipment is already very heavy. We really can't bring too much gunpowder. It's okay, the gunpowder has been sent over. It's in the row of houses in the backyard. It's enough for you to kill tens of thousands of people, ha ha ha. Yang Qindong was in a very good mood at this moment. He had done what he needed to do now. He was just waiting for the other party to lose their patience and finally come knocking on his door. Then he could take advantage of the situation and launch the final counterattack. He believed that this would not take too long. Beta Persei had already disappeared by this time. Needless to say, he went to the backyard to check on the firearms and ammunition. When he saw the house that was thousands of square meters full of all kinds of weapons and ammunition, his mouth opened so wide that he could easily stuff an egg into it. After a while, Beta Persei couldn't help but say to himself, who sent this? How did it get here? Why didn't the Black Cavalry notice it at all? Fortunately, it's an ally. If it was an enemy, wouldn't it be too scary? Beta Persei, who had enough ammunition, was naturally not afraid. Thinking back to the time when the 2,000 Black Cavalry had enough ammunition, even the 100,000 Baiming Liaodong Iron Cavalry could be dealt with. Although they only had 500 people now, it would not be a problem for them to eliminate tens of thousands of soldiers from the 3 provinces. How would Zhu Huili know about this? After a discussion with Chen Tian and Wang Zhangjiang, he only needed to wait for the next night to arrive. He would then make his move and exhaust the enemy's ammunition until an opportunity presented itself. He would then go straight for the middle of the army and capture Yang Qindong alive. Just as Yang Qindong thought, Zhu Huichun would not wait for too long. He wanted to catch Yang Qindong too much. He wanted to prove himself too much. He wanted to become a true king or even an emperor. The night passed, and the next morning, the black cavalry began to change shifts. Those on duty went to sleep, while the black cavalry who had enough sleep got up and took over the defense work. However, before his opponent arrived, Dong Xuanfu was the first to come. He stood respectfully outside the small courtyard, and after announcing his name, he stood there obediently and waited to be received. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that every day felt like a year. Every day, he and the other members of the diplomatic mission passed in fear. No one knew when the three provincial kings would be in a bad mood and suddenly surround them and kill them. Fortunately, no killing intent appeared, and they finally persevered until Yang Chendong arrived. Dong Xuanfu could be considered to have completed his mission, and before he left, he had to come and see the king. This was his duty as a subject. Yang Chendong slept well in the second half of the night, but Beta Persei was a little excited and had a pair of panda eyes. Ba Daojiang walked into the courtyard and reported that Dong Xuanfu had asked for an audience outside the door. After hearing this, Yang Chendong nodded and said, "Then let him in." After a while, Dong Xuanfu, who was dressed in a Chinese tunic suit, came in front of Yang Chendong. He then knelt down and greeted him, respectfully calling him Your Majesty and greeting him well. "Get up." Letting Dong Xuanfu kneel on the ground, Yang Chendong didn't stop him. He knew that these people who used to be officials in the Great Ming Dynasty attached great importance to etiquette. If he dared not to let him kneel, he would inevitably be nagged and his ears would suffer. "How is it? Have you gained anything during this time?" With a slight smile on his face, Yang Chendong said with a pleasant expression. Although these people have made inappropriate remarks, Yang Wu reported in the telegram that these people are still very honest and competent for the work in hand. It's just that their thinking is somewhat traditional. If it wasn't for the fact that he was upright, how could he have become a vice minister? How could Yang Chendong tolerate them until now? Of course, Dong Xuanfu was found by Yu Qian. Needless to say, people who can be recognized by this person are not worried about their standing. When asked what he had learned, Dong Xuanfu, who had just stood up, sighed and said, "Your Majesty, this king of the three provinces is really too hateful. Ever since we came here, we have never seen him. Not only does he put on a high and mighty appearance, but he also frequently makes the soldiers guarding us make frightening movements. He is really hateful. It's also thanks to Your Majesty's wisdom that we can suppress him and make him obediently surrender to us." Even at this time, Dong Xuanfu was still kind enough to think that Yang Chendong's arrival was really to accept Zhu Huihua's surrender. Regarding this, Yang Chendong didn't mean to explain. He didn't want to show off his greatness in front of his officials, as if his appearance saved these people. Although this was the truth, but even without these people, in the face of righteousness, Yang Chendong was skilled and bold, and would still make this trip. He also didn't want to say that the reason why Zhu Huihua let Dong Xuanfu and the others go was because they were useless. And letting them go could also show his benevolence and make him famous. Well, this time when you go back, work hard. You also need to know that in this world, the so-called justice is just in the end, whose fist is bigger. Otherwise, the weak will not have any right to speak and receive any respect. If you have time, you can tell your colleagues about your experience. Perhaps a country can be ruled by law, by etiquette, and by virtue. But a country must be founded with one's fist. This is a principle that hasn't been repeated for thousands of years. Sometimes, killing people is also to save more people, understand? It was rare for Yang Chendong to say so much at once. Dong Xuanfu remembered it all in his heart and quickly bowed his head and said, "I will remember Your Majesty's teachings." "Good, go back. Leave in the morning, there's no need to stay." After Yang Chendong gave Dong Xuanfu one last warning, he waved his hand, and Ba Daojiang walked up and led him away. Yang Chendong slowly closed his eyes and thought about the current situation. There were only 3 reasons why Zhu Huihua didn't kill Dong Xuanfu and the others. First, it was disdain. After all, with a big fish like him around, everyone else could be ignored. Second, it was to confuse him and make him feel that the other party was really unwell, which was why they didn't come to negotiate. Then, if he was careless, it would be time for the other party to bare his fangs. Third, it was to make a name for himself. However, that was because he could kill him. If he couldn't do that, then the third reason was useless. Fine, Zhu Huihua, continue acting. Let's see if you can swallow me this time, or if I can become Sun Wukong and wreak havoc in Princess Iron Fan's stomach and win in the end. The day passed uneventfully. Only in the morning did Chen Tian come over. Other than asking Yang Chendong how he slept last night, he also reported that Dong Chuanfu and the others had left the city. At the same time, he also said that their king Zhu Huihua's health had improved a little, but it would take a few more days for him to fully recover. He asked Yang Chendong to be understanding and wait patiently. Who didn't know how to act? Yang Chendong reprimanded Chen Tian in front of him, saying that the killers that appeared last night had a lot to do with the lack of protection from the 3 provinces. Then, he said that he was busy with official business and couldn't wait here for more than a few days. If Zhu Huichun still couldn't come to see him in 3 days at most, he would leave. At that time, he would bring the steel cavalry. Hearing Yang Chendong give a deadline of 3 days, Chen Tian was happy, but he pretended to be serious and said, "Yes, please rest assured, Bugnam of Gojoseon. In 3 days, my king's health should be able to hold on until he comes to see you. As for what happened last night, they have already investigated. It was done by Shiping Wang's Mu family. It should be the Southern Ming court's intention." He also said that since the other side didn't succeed, they won't let it go. They might continue to attack, but he will tell the guards outside to strengthen their defenses. Is he trying to give me a heads up? Yang Chendong thought in his heart, but he didn't say anything. This was the game. There were all kinds of tricks, and there was nothing to object to. If Yang Chendong didn't need to do this to obtain the righteous cause and take control of the 3 provinces, he wouldn't have to go through so much trouble. However, the 3 provinces were Han territory, and there were Han people here. If he didn't want the people to suffer too much, it was inevitable that he had to play some tricks. Chen Tian left, but when he returned, he reported the information to Zhu Huiyun. The two discussed that they had to use up all the firearms and ammunition brought by the Black Cavalry in 3 nights. If they couldn't do it in 3 nights, they would turn hostile on the 4th day. In short, they couldn't let Yang Chendong escape. Even if they couldn't capture him alive, they had to kill him and leave behind a corpse. Passively taking a beating wasn't Yang Chendong's personality. He was surrounded by Wang Zhangjiang's army in the small courtyard and couldn't get out, but he had a radio. He used the radio to broadcast what happened last night to the head of the security bureau, Ong San, who had arrived at Yunnan Manor earlier. Yes, this time, Yang San was also ordered to rush to Yunnan Manor. His main task was to investigate which traitor colluded with the 3 provinces' kings and sold out Yang Xia and the 5-star army. In the past few years, Yang San's activities were mostly in the Baiming area. Although Yang Xia didn't have the intention to use force there were too many young masters' relatives in the capital of Baiming. Not to mention others, Yang Chendong's brothers and sisters were all here. Chapter 1565. Ever since Yang Chendong had left Baiming's capital and headed south, his relatives in the capital had been treated like an otherworldly existence. Even though the Baiming emperor and a few important officials loathed them, they didn't dare to do anything. This situation was very strange and complicated. Yang Chendong wouldn't be at ease if he sent someone else. Therefore, he handed the matter of the Southern Ming to Yang Lu and the matter of the Northern Ming to Yang San. Over the years, Yang San had done a very good job. Under the watchful eyes of others, the Yang clan's relatives hadn't been attacked by any external forces. But at the beginning of this year, Yang Chendong's eldest sister, Yang Fei, had passed away due to illness at the age of 59. In that era, living to 60 was already considered a long life. This was something that no one could resist. But because Yang Chendong was busy and couldn't personally go due to special circumstances, he left everything to Yang San. He took care of it. As soon as the funeral was over, Yang San received a new order. Without stopping, he rushed to the 3 provinces and secretly entered the southern Cloud Manor. With the capabilities of the Security Bureau, he naturally had a special way to enter the city without being discovered by Zhu Huichun's spies. This order was passed down by Yang Qindong to Yang San, asking him to spread the news in the city. Last night, someone wanted to harm him, and spread Chen Tian's words. Furthermore, he emphasized that he had to spread the news to the commoners and let them know that if anything happened to him here, the 5-star army would definitely be enraged and would flatten this place. At that time, the first ones to suffer would definitely be the commoners at the lowest level. This was why Yang Qindong was willing to be bait. How to guide the public opinion, how to make the public opinion work for him, how to use the public opinion to achieve his goals, and so on. As a person of the future, he was very clear about this. Don't underestimate the public opinion. If things were done well, it could hold up against hundreds of thousands of soldiers. After sending out the telegram, Yang San didn't disappoint. Not long after, rumors began to appear in Yunnan Manor, spreading to the restaurants and markets where people gathered. Some of the citizens had also heard about the gunshots that were heard in the city last night. At first, they didn't know what this meant, but after hearing those rumors, they suddenly realized that someone was trying to harm Bugnam of Gojoseon. As the rumors spread more and more, all kinds of unfavorable news began to spread among the people. After 4 hours of fermenting, the public opinion was boiling in the afternoon, and the news had spread to the extent that everyone in the streets and alleys knew about it. Have you heard? Last night, there were assassins who rushed into the courtyard where Bugnam of Gojoseon lived. Just the sound of gunfire alone has been ringing for a long time. Why haven't I heard about it? Everyone knows about it now. Hey, who do you think is so daring? Guns are so powerful, aren't we just going to die? Come on, what do you care about? Did you not consider what would happen if the assassins hurt Bugnam of Gojoseon? What would happen? This sentence attracted the attention of many people in the tea house. Think about it, if something happened to Bugnam of Gojoseon in our Yunnan Manor, wouldn't his brave subordinates seek revenge? If that's the case, who will be the unlucky one in the end? After about a few breaths. Someone seemed to have reacted. If something happened to Bugnam of Gojoseon in our place, I'm afraid that the 5-star army will definitely trample our Yunnan Manor to avenge their king. Then, won't we, the citizens, suffer? More than suffering, I'm afraid we won't be able to survive. Hiss. What followed was the sound of people inhaling cold air. This probably won't happen. We all know this. How can the 3 kings not know this? He will definitely send people to protect Bugnam of Gojoseon. There were still people in the crowd who were hoping for a fluke and said, "Protect Bugnam of Gojoseon? I'm afraid you still don't know. Ever since Bugnam of Gojoseon came to our Yunnan Manor yesterday, the 3 kings claimed to be sick and didn't come to see him. Who knows what he's thinking? Maybe those assassins were sent by the 3 kings." Silence, silence. How can you talk about these things? Maybe the 3 kings are really sick. Some people didn't agree with this point of view and took the initiative to explain for Zhu Huichun. Really sick? If that's the case, then it's good. I'm afraid that they have ulterior motives. Sigh, if that's the case, then what should we do? Then, why don't we go and protect Bugnam of Gojoseon, or persuade him to leave? Anyway, he can't be hurt here. Who said no? I thought that the 3 kings were clear. After Bugnam of Gojoseon came, we, the citizens, would be at peace. Who would have thought that things would turn out like this? Sigh, isn't this going back on their word? Under the guidance of a few Yang Xie's intelligence personnel, the public opinion began to develop in a direction that was favorable to Yang Qindong and unfavorable to Zhu Huichun. As more and more people discussed, the citizens in the tea house gathered around. Later, it was unknown who suggested it, but in the end, this was the result. First, everyone split up and went to the 3 kings' mansions to petition them. They asked the 3 kings to meet with Bugnam of Gojoseon to discuss the peace talks. Second, the rest of the people went to the courtyard where Bugnam of Gojoseon lived. Everyone was to protect him on their own. In short, before the matter was clarified, nothing could happen to Yang Qindong. Otherwise, they would be the ones in trouble. After the discussion came to a conclusion, the citizens in the tea house quickly dispersed. Everyone began to contact people. For matters that concerned the life and death of their own family, no one would ignore it and no one would be indifferent. The streets of Southern Cloud Manor became lively after this discussion was spread out. Many commoners began to gather. A portion of them headed straight for the 3 provincial princes' residences. A portion of them headed straight for the small courtyard where Yang Chendong lived with sticks and iron weapons. The appearance of one citizen naturally did not attract the attention of the 3 provinces' army. It was the same even if there were 10 or 100 of them. However, when the number of people increased to the point that there were thousands of them, even the army felt afraid. Is this a mass uprising? When he learned that there were more than 5,000 citizens with all kinds of weapons coming in the direction of the courtyard, General Wang Zhangjiang, who was guarding there, was puzzled. He did not know why such a thing happened. Could it be that the citizens wanted to take Bugnam of Gojoseon's life? When this idea appeared, Wang Zhangjiang felt that it was an opportunity. If Yang Chendong died in the hands of the citizens, then it had nothing to do with him. He could also complete the task given by the king. Wouldn't it be the best of both worlds? At that moment, Wang Zhangjiang ordered the soldiers guarding outside not to put up much resistance. They only needed to put up a symbolic resistance to the commoners. If they really wanted to rush into the small courtyard, then they could do as they wished. Anyway, these citizens were spontaneous and not organized by him. If something really happened, it would have nothing to do with him. Without anyone stopping them, the citizens easily arrived outside the courtyard. Then, under Wang Zhangjiang's stupefied gaze, these people surrounded the 6 doors of the small courtyard and sat down on the ground. From the looks of it, it was clear that they were not going to leave. At this moment, Wang Zhangjiang could tell that these people were not here to cause trouble for Yang Chendong. They were clearly here to protect this person. When he thought that with the presence of these citizens, tonight's operation would not be able to proceed normally, cold sweat broke out on Wang Zhangjiang's forehead. Men, chase these citizens out. Quickly chase them away. When the soldiers of the 3 provinces who were originally standing around and watching heard the general shout, they all walked forward reluctantly. However, how could it be so easy for 1,000 soldiers to chase away 5,000 citizens? The outside of the courtyard was very lively. The commotion quickly attracted the attention of the black cavalry in the courtyard. Commander Dao Shao, who was in charge of the day shift, immediately sent people out to understand the situation. After knowing the general cause of the matter, he reported it to Yang Chendong in the main courtyard, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. The citizens want to help us guard the courtyard? This is a good thing. This proves that the young master has the support of the citizens. The straightforward Beta Persei was elated when he heard this and bared his teeth. Yang Chendong, who had closed the book in his hand, also had a warm smile on his face. He could not help but sigh in his heart. This was the power of the citizens. Although they usually did not show their strength, when it came to their interests or even life and death, they would erupt with a powerful force. Wasn't the reason why the great Ming dynasty was destroyed in history because of the various uprisings of the citizens? First, the country was in chaos, and this gave the slaves an opportunity to take advantage of it. At this moment, he showed some interest. He wanted to see what these citizens would do. Outside the courtyard, the soldiers and the citizens were confronting each other. Because of the difference in numbers, the soldiers of the 3 provinces did not have any advantage. Although they all had standard swords in their hands, they did not dare to casually kill the citizens. What if they angered the citizens and caused a mutiny? What's more, the soldiers were originally made up of commoners, and some of them were originally from the Southern Cloud Manor. His friends and relatives were among these 5,000 people, so how could they bear to kill them? In the chaos, the situation was already out of control. Wang Zhangjiang had no choice but to retreat and go straight to the 3 provincial palaces to ask for reinforcements. At this time, the 3 provincial palaces were also not peaceful. Thousands of citizens were gathered outside, shouting loudly. They wanted the 3 provincial kings to see Bugnam of Gojoseon and discuss the peace talks together. Bugnam of Gojoseon is already here. Now is the time for us to show our sincerity. We can't go back on our words. That's right. A person must be honest. He came to our territory without worry. We can't treat Bugnam of Gojoseon like this. Willing to invite the 3 provincial kings to go to the peace talks. Willing to invite the 3 provincial kings to go to the peace talks. Chapter 1566. More and more voices rang out, and finally, they converged into one sentence. Outside the mansion, the shouts grew louder and louder. Inside the mansion, Zhu Huiqiu's expression was very ugly. He couldn't understand why the situation had suddenly changed. What had happened? Chen Tian had been urgently summoned from the backyard of the mansion. When he heard the shouts outside, he said nervously, "Your Majesty, this matter must be suppressed. We can't agree to the people's demands." Zhu Huiqiu rolled his eyes at Chen Tian. Isn't this nonsense? It wasn't easy to trick Yang Qindong into coming here. How could he be satisfied if he didn't teach him a lesson? That's enough, Chen Gonggang. Let's talk about what we should do now. Okay. Chen Tian fell into deep thought. But as expected of Zhu Huiqiu's think tank, he quickly raised his head again. Your Majesty, we can only stall for time now. At the same time, we have to act quickly. Chen Tian took a step forward and reported his idea to Zhu Huiqiu in a low voice. Zhu Huiqiu kept nodding as he listened. Finally, he waved his arm and said, "That's right. Let's do it this way. But it's a pity. I'm afraid it will be difficult to capture Yang Qindong alive and use him for our own purposes. Your Majesty, don't worry. When the time is right, I will have a good talk with Bugnam of Gojoseon. I don't think anyone is willing to die. Maybe there's still a chance. I hope so. Chen Gonggang, I'll leave this matter to you. Go ahead and do it." Zhu Huiqiu waved his hand and sighed. After watching Chen Tian leave, he thought for a moment and went straight to the backyard of the mansion. In the backyard, Mo Gui was sitting in front of the pond. He seemed to know that Zhu Huiqiu was coming. There were 2 teacups in front of him, and the tea was still steaming. "King of the 3 provinces, please take a seat." Mo Gui modestly invited Zhu Huiqiu to take a seat in front of him. Zhu Huiyun admired Mo Gui's calmness very much. His originally restless heart seemed to have calmed down at this moment. "Mr. Mo, I'm actually here to ask for your advice. In your opinion, how do you think we should resolve the current situation?" Mo Gui wasn't surprised by Zhu Huiqiu's answer. After a sigh, he said, "Your Highness, as I said before, my master's intention is to wait for Yang Qindong to enter the courtyard before making a move. After all, there are only 500 people. As long as we do our best and don't fear losses, the victory will be ours. To deal with Yang Qindong, either you don't make a move, or you have to go all out. You can't have the slightest bit of wishful thinking, and you can't even try to probe him." Seeing that Mo Huiguan was about to go on, Zhu Huiqun quickly interrupted him. "Mr. Mo, let's not talk about what happened before. Let's talk about what to do next. I really didn't expect this Bugnam of Gojoseon to know how to threaten the people's will. Now this prince has a headache. It doesn't matter. We just have to make a move later. I just don't know if your Highness is ready to make a move now." Mo Gui said the word, "yes," in his heart, but he didn't show it on his face. "Of course we have to make a move. I've already discussed it with Mr. Chen. We'll do our best tonight. We have to take down Bugnam of Gojoseon, dead or alive." Zhu Huichun told Mo Gui about Chen Tian's idea. "Good. Since your Highness has made up your mind, don't worry about it. If anything happens, my master won't just stand by and watch. My master has prepared a backup plan. Yang Qindong must die." Mo Gui's face was full of murderous intent as he said this. This was the final mission his master gave him. If he didn't complete it well, his head would roll. In comparison, he certainly hoped that Yang Qindong would die, not him. When Zhu Huichun heard Mo Gui say that he had a backup plan, he felt good. This was the result he wanted. Now that he had achieved his goal, he nodded with satisfaction. Good. I'll have to trouble Mr. Mo. Of course, if you need my help in any way, just let me know. Ha ha ha. The change in public opinion made Zhu Huichun's 3-day attack turn into a 1-day attack. He was going to see the results tonight. For this, Wang Zhangjiang received a large number of reinforcements. A total of 4,000 soldiers rushed out of the courtyard. 5,000 soldiers fought against 5,000 civilians and chased away the stick-wielding civilians. When the commoners saw so many soldiers from the 3 provinces outside the small courtyard, their anxious hearts relaxed. With so many soldiers protecting Bugnam of Gojoseon, their safety shouldn't be a problem. They scattered in all directions. However, when Yang Chendong, who was in the courtyard, learned about the situation outside, his expression became much more dignified. He had a feeling that it was time for the dagger to be revealed. Beta Persei, take out all the weapons and ammunition of the Black Cavalry and equip them. Young master, are they going to make a move? Beta Persei asked cautiously. Maybe, maybe not. But it's not wrong to be prepared. Go do it. Yang Chendong waved his hand, then returned to his desk and began to draft a telegram. Once Zhu Huichun turned hostile, he would have to send the main force of the 5-star army to the 3 provinces. At that time, he would have the right to do so. This time, the other party didn't want to give him face. Presumably, once the news spread, the civilians would understand his decision to send troops, and there would be less resistance. It had to be said that for the safety of the 3 provinces, Yang Chendong did a lot and was willing to take this risk. This was completely in line with his goal of bringing the Han people to the top of the world. 5,000 against 500, this was the first dish that Zhu Huichun prepared for Yang Chendong. If things didn't go well, he would continue to deploy troops. Speaking of which, in Yunnan Prefecture, he had 50,000 troops stationed there. He didn't believe that he couldn't kill Yang Chendong with 100 times the force. In a courtyard 2 alleys away from Yang Chendong's courtyard, 200 strong warriors were sharpening their swords. If Zhu Huichun could see them, he would recognize that the leader was Muang from the Mu family of the Shiping King. Muang, the nephew of the current Shiping King, Mu Bin, was the bravest person in the younger generation of the Mu family. Even Mu Bin's eldest son, Mu Tsong, couldn't compare to him. It was because of his bravery that he was given the task of assassinating Yang Chendong. Yang Chendong's existence was a great threat to the great Ming dynasty's political power. It could be said that as long as this person didn't die, it was only a matter of time before he replaced the great Ming dynasty's political power. Because of this, after hearing that Yang Chendong had entered Yunnan Prefecture with only 500 black cavalry, Muang was immediately sent out. The purpose was to complete the task of assassinating Bugnam of Gojoseon. This was a risky move, but when Mu Bin, the king of Shiping, found Muang, he brought his 200 men of sacrifice to Yunnan Prefecture without saying a word and successfully went into hiding. As a member of the Mu family, they were very familiar with Yunnan Prefecture. These 200 men of sacrifice were deeply indebted to the Mu family, so they came with the intention of returning the favor. To put it bluntly, they didn't plan to return alive. The small courtyard was silent, showing the excellent quality of the men of sacrifice. In the corner, Mu Bin was talking in a low voice with the leader of the men of sacrifice. The general idea was that there was a new movement on Zhu Huiyun's side. It seemed that he was going to make a move on Bugnam of Gojoseon and Yang Chendong tonight. Well, keep an eye on them. It's fine if they succeed. If they don't succeed, it'll be our turn to attack. In short, Yang Chendong must die. Mu Eng's face was unusually firm, holding the idea of success or death. The Mu family was indebted to the Zhu family and guarded Nanjiang for the great Ming dynasty. Everything changed because of the appearance of Yang Chendong. Now, not only did they lose their foundation in Yunnan, but they were also hiding in a small place like Kelisai, not daring to show their faces. Gradually, the name of the Mu family was forgotten by the world. This was something that Muang didn't want to face. Just when the Mu family was feeling helpless, they learned that Yang Chendong had entered Yunnan Prefecture to negotiate with Zhu Huiyun, the king of 3 provinces. They were like people who were groping in the dark suddenly seeing the sun, suddenly giving birth to new hope. In other words, if Yang Chendong died, the Mu family had to live. Otherwise, they would die without a doubt. Once the king of 3 provinces was defeated by Yang Chendong, the Mu family would have no soil to live on. Even if they died, they would have no face to see their ancestors. For the sake of the entire Mu family, it was just sacrificing these 200 men of sacrifice and Muang. What was the big deal? Muang made up his mind at this moment. However, what he didn't know was that in a small courtyard in the southern Cloud Manor, there was a group of men in black who were also preparing to fight to the death. They were relatively short, but their murderous aura didn't diminish. They were faintly discernible in the darkness. Yang Chendong didn't know that there was more than one enemy, but he was definitely not afraid. In his goal of achieving the great Han people's revival, he was destined to walk on an unusual path, and was destined to be full of danger. Beta Persei had already taken out firearms and ammunition with Dao Xiao and Ba Dao Jiang and equipped themselves. Not only that, they also took out all the things that could be used and built several blockades. With Yang Chendong's courtyard as the center, they built an arch-shaped temporary trench. Although they couldn't exert their full combat power due to the limitations of the environment and tools, as long as the other party didn't have artillery, it would be difficult to break through their defense line. Tell the soldiers to put on all their equipment. They must protect their own safety. Young Master said that it's fine if the army of 3 provinces doesn't attack, but if they do, they will use all their strength. Our opponents are 10 times, 100 times, or even more enemies. Beta Persei faced a group of black cavalry squad captains and said this with a serious expression. Chapter 1567. Beta Persei couldn't understand why the young master didn't allow them to take the initiative to attack. The situation was obviously very dangerous, and Zhu Huihua's ambitions were completely exposed. What they should do now was to take advantage of the fact that it wasn't dark and suddenly kill their way out. This way, they could catch the other party off guard. Coupled with the undercover intelligence agents in the city, the chances of them leaving the city would be greatly increased. In the eyes of Beta Persei and the other black cavalry, Yang Chendong's safety was naturally the first priority. In order to complete this mission, everyone was willing to sacrifice themselves. They really couldn't figure out why Yang Chendong still hadn't made such a decision. But they didn't know that Yang Chendong had his own reasons for doing so. He wanted to take this opportunity to find out who the traitor was. Ever since he found out about the traitor, Yang Chendong felt like he was sitting on a needle. The feeling that someone could harm him anytime and anywhere made him feel very uncomfortable. In order to solve this problem, Yang Chendong risked his life to come to Yunnan Manor. He didn't believe that the traitor would still hide and not make a move under such an opportunity. As long as the traitor made a move, Yang San might discover something. Once he discovered the traitor, it would be the time for the real acquisition. Only then would the risk be worth it. Taking advantage of this opportunity to let the traitor jump out and then catch them all in one fell swoop was another main purpose of Yang Chendong's trip. As for whether the black cavalry would be in danger by doing this, with the firearms and ammunition he took out from the warehouse, it shouldn't be too big of a problem even if there was a problem. In order to completely eliminate the hidden danger, this risk was worth taking. Once Zhu Huichuo brazenly started to make a move, the nearby 5-star army would gather together. At that time, the 500 black cavalry dragon guards would only need to hold on for 3 days, and the main army would arrive. The danger would also be resolved. These 3 days were the opportunity for the traitor to make a move. He also believed that it would be difficult for the traitor to hold back. After all, it was such a good opportunity. If he didn't make a move, it would be hard to say whether there would be such a chance next time. Sitting in the main hall of the main room, Yang Chendong had already asked Wang Shan to send a telegram to Yang San, asking him to keep a close eye on every move of the 3 provinces, regardless of who they contacted. Or if someone contacted them on their own initiative, they had to follow this clue and investigate it thoroughly. In short, they had to take this opportunity to find the traitor. The black cavalry began to make various preparations, and the sky gradually darkened. Finally, the sky turned completely dark, and the sound of the night watch rang out. About 10 miles into the night, there was finally some movement outside the courtyard. The sound of a large number of footsteps could be heard. Everyone, get ready. Let's give them a taste of grenades first. The person in charge of the first line of defense was Biyao, the vice-captain of the Black Cavalry's 1st Battalion. Beta Persei had already informed him that 5 of the 6 gates in the 2 courtyards had been firmly nailed from the inside. In order to prevent the enemy from climbing over the walls, they had buried landmines on the ground of the walls to ensure that no matter how many enemies came, they would all die. This was the only gate in the 6 gates that could be entered at any time. Biyao was guarding this gate. There were already several light and heavy machine guns set up here, forming a powerful firepower net to ensure that no one could pass through the net and rush in. A full 4 days of dry food and water had also been prepared. As soon as the battle started, the telegraph office would send out a request for help. Then, 3 days later, the main force of the 5-star army would arrive outside Yunnan Mansion. At that time, the situation would be settled. Within these 3 days, Yang Chendong's safety would be completely handed over to the 500 Black Cavalry. Everyone was both excited and worried about this sacred mission. They were excited that such a great mission was handed over to them. After completing the mission, this would be the most exciting experience of their lives. They were worried that if the enemy rushed in and hurt the 6th young master, even if it was just a hair, they would not be able to atone for it even if they died 100 times. We must not let the 6th young master suffer even the slightest bit of harm. This was the common thought of the 500 Black Cavalry. In order to achieve this goal, everyone took out 100% of their spirit, loaded their guns, and aimed at the enemy. The sound of footsteps was getting closer and closer. It seemed that the 3 provincial armies were gathering outside. This created a dark cloud over the people's heads. If it was an ordinary army, they would have been so nervous that they would be sweating profusely. They might even be trembling all over and unable to hold their weapons tightly. After all, they only had 500 people. The 3 provincial armies alone had more than 50,000 soldiers in Yunnan Mansion. This ratio of 1 to 100 sounded really scary. Even if they were holding firearms that were more advanced than this era, the enemy's advantage in numbers was still like a dark cloud. It was so oppressive that it made it hard for them to breathe. However, with 500 Black Cavalry, they were much calmer. As veterans of hundreds of battles, as the Black Cavalry who had participated in 2,000 against 100,000 and defeated the enemy without suffering any injuries, they were only excited. In their eyes, the so-called 50,000 enemies were all military exploits. Time passed by minute by minute. The footsteps outside were getting louder and louder. As the Black Cavalry who had rich combat experience, they could tell from the sound of the footsteps that there were at least 3,000 enemies, maybe even more. There were only about 100 soldiers who were guarding this door with Biyao. However, they were not afraid at all. This was because among the 100 soldiers, there were more than 10 light and heavy machine guns. This gave them a strong sense of confidence. Clang, 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 the sound of the door being knocked was finally heard. The wooden door that was only rigged with a few wooden wedges soon vibrated. At the same time, the soldiers of the 3 provincial armies shouted, "Brothers inside the door, open the door quickly. There are assassins here. We need to go in and search for the assassins." Biyao scoffed at this lame excuse. He held the grenade in his hand, ready to pull the pin at any time, waiting to throw it out. After a few shouts, the soldiers of the 3 provincial armies finally pushed the wooden door open. They did not expect the Black Cavalry to answer them or open the door. The shouts just now were just an excuse for them to show up. The moment the wooden door was pushed open, a black mass of figures appeared. Countless soldiers of the 3 provincial armies rushed in like a sluice gate. "Throw it." Biyao did not hesitate. After shouting, he threw the grenade in his hand forward. Along with it, hundreds of other grenades were thrown forward. Boom boom boom. Boom boom boom, the sound of explosions rose one after another in the dark night. Under the loud explosions, there was a series of screams and screams. Type 95 opened fire. As soon as the grenades exploded, Biyao gave the order. Then, a series of shots were fired in the direction of the door. Some of the soldiers of the three provincial armies who were rushing forward or trying to climb over the wall cried out in pain. This was just the first round of attacks, and there were probably hundreds of casualties or serious injuries. Outside the other 5 doors, there was also a series of explosions. Needless to say, someone must have stepped on a landmine and caused an explosion. This was a sign that the enemy had launched an all-out attack. After a series of gunshots, the area in front of the wooden door became much quieter. The soldiers of the three provincial armies quickly retreated after leaving a trail of corpses on the ground. It was obvious that they were just testing the waters. The black cavalry was the best of the best. The soldiers of the three provincial armies did not expect to be able to break into the courtyard in a single charge. Quick, this door is open. Everyone, gather here. A thunderous voice came from outside the courtyard. Clearly, after the other courtyards were unable to be opened, this courtyard that was the only one that was opened attracted the attention of even more people. General Wang Zhanjiang, who was in charge of the attack outside the door, began to deploy his troops and rearrange the attack plan. The sturdiness of this courtyard was not bad. Even in the face of a few explosions, it did not collapse. It had to be said that the seriousness of the people in ancient times was much better than the shoddy construction of modern times. Originally, they were worried that the wall would collapse because of the explosion. If that happened, without anything to rely on, the difficulty of defending would be several times greater. Now that he knew that the walls were fine, the commander of this battle, young heir, heaved a sigh of relief. Very good, leave the rest to Biyao. We will continue to dig the tunnel. We must be quick, we don't have much time left. After speaking, Beta Persei did not care about the battle outside. He waved the military shovel and continued to rise to the ground. At this time, there was a huge pit nearly 2 meters deep on the ground, and it was still deepening. After about a quarter of an hour of rest, the soldiers of the three provincial armies outside the courtyard launched the second wave of attack. Compared to the last time, they had more people this time, and the momentum of the attack was more powerful. Everyone, don't be afraid. They don't have much firearms and ammunition. As long as they don't have firearms, they can't be our opponents. Charge! Wang Zhanjiang stood outside and shouted, cheering the soldiers on. Under the general's shout, a large number of figures appeared in front of the wooden door and on the wall. They were all fierce, cheering themselves on as they rushed forward to face the flying bullets. Pa-pa-pa. Pa-pa-pa. Gunshots rang out again, and one by one, the black figures fell on the wooden door or on the courtyard wall. The figures that were alive and kicking just now were now bloody corpses. With just one wave of attack, at least hundreds of soldiers from the three provincial armies died. In this regard, Wang Zhanjiang, as the commander, did not have the slightest hint of pain on his face. These were all ordinary soldiers. In the eyes of the general, their lives were as cheap as dogs. If they died, they died. As long as there was money and food, they could quickly raise a new army. Chapter 1568. Charge. Continue to charge. The enemy's firearms can't possibly have unlimited gunpowder. Charge. Charge. Wang Zhanjiang yelled at the top of his lungs as he commanded the soldiers to charge into the courtyard one after another. It was as if they would not stop until they reached their goal. The charging troops came one after another. Even though the number of corpses on the ground was increasing, it still could not stop them from charging forward. As the charging momentum became more and more ferocious, they finally relied on their advantage in numbers to charge into the courtyard. They were less than 80 feet away from the black cavalry. Machine gun team, get ready. Fire in one shot. Other than occasionally shooting with the 95 style, Badaojiang had been observing the changes in the battle situation. Seeing that the enemy's attacks were getting more and more ferocious, he could no longer control the situation by relying on the 95 style. Hence, he gave the order to the machine gun team. The so-called fire in one shot referred to the fact that they could only fire a clip of bullets. This way, they could stabilize the situation and not waste bullets. The machine gun team members who were already itching for a fight could only watch helplessly when they saw their comrades killing the enemy to their heart's content. Now that they had finally received the order to open fire, how could they be courteous? All the light and heavy machine guns rang out, and the bullets rained down like rain. The soldiers of the 3 provinces who had barely escaped death fell to the ground one by one. Da-da-da. Da-da-da-da. Under the sound of the machine guns, not a single living enemy could be seen in the courtyard in less than 20 seconds. The advantage that the 3 provincial armies had gained with great difficulty was wiped out in an instant. The dense sound of machine guns also caused the 3 provincial troops who were preparing to continue their charge to slow down. Then, Wang Zhangjiang yelled, "Stop charging! Stop charging!" They had no choice but to stop. Under such dense gunfire and the terrain that was less than 50 feet wide, the number of people sent out would be the same as the number of people who died. Calculate the casualties. Wang Zhangjiang yelled loudly. Then, he wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. Just a moment ago, he was prepared to lead the charge in order to encourage the soldiers. After all, there were already people who had charged in. In his mind, as long as he could charge in front of the black cavalry, he would be able to utilize the advantage of cold weapons. At that time, with the advantage of superior numbers, he would be able to exhaust his opponents to death even if he had to exhaust them. However, a burst of concentrated gunfire made him think that it was a close call. At the same time, he also completely withdrew the idea of taking the lead to attack. That was a flintlock, and when it hit a person's body, a hole would appear, and a person would die. Even if a civet turned around and had 9 lives, it would still die miserably in such a situation. Even so, if he had nothing better to do, why would he lead the charge? That was not a charge, but a fight to the death. At the same time, Wang Zhangjiang couldn't figure it out. When the black cavalry entered the city, he didn't see them carrying any heavy firearms. So what was going on? Also, didn't the black cavalry have limited ammunition? But from the looks of it, how could it be limited at all? They didn't have the slightest intention of saving when fighting. He cursed in his heart. He didn't know who provided the information that the 5-star army didn't have enough ammunition and almost got him killed. He then waited for the battle damage statistics. The Kiliarchs and Centurions below played their roles and quickly reported the battle situation to him, the commander of the army. When the final statistics came out, even though Wang Zhangjiang was already prepared, he still couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. 3,200 people. From the beginning to the end, not even half an hour had passed, and 3,200 soldiers had died. Among them, there were 400 soldiers who died outside the other 5 courtyards. The number of soldiers who died at the courtyard gate in front of him reached 2,700. Looking at this shocking number, Wang Zhangjiang looked back in disbelief. Only then did he realize that the originally densely packed army had been reduced by a lot. Only a little more than a third of the original 5,000 people were left. Don't charge for now, wait for orders. Wang Zhangjiang quickly made the decision to stop the charge and report the battle results. After all, if he continued to charge, he was afraid that his less than 2,000 subordinates would only be feeding bullets to the enemy. If he didn't handle it well, the black cavalry would see through him. If they counterattacked, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to stop them even if he wanted to. He left a few confidants and ordered them to keep an eye on the 5-star army in the courtyard. No matter what, he couldn't let them suddenly go out. He then rode on his warhorse and went straight to the king's mansion. The sound of gunfire could be heard throughout the city. Zhu Huiqiu, who was in the king's mansion, was naturally no exception. At this moment, he was pacing back and forth in the main hall of the 5 prefectures. Although he hadn't received the relevant battle report yet, from the dense gunfire, he had a feeling that the situation wasn't very favorable. Wang Zhangjiang came and immediately stood in front of Zhu Huiqiu and reported the battle situation. Hearing this, the expression of the three provincial kings changed again and again. After a while, his face darkened. "You're saying that the Black Cavalry has enough ammunition and they don't have any intention of stopping shooting?" "Yes." Wang Zhangjiang lowered his head. After sensing the king's anger, he didn't even dare to raise his head. "How is this possible?" Zhu Huiqiu said in disbelief. After anxiously pacing back and forth a few steps, he asked loudly, "When they entered the city, didn't you all see it? Did they bring any carriages?" "No." Wang Zhangjiang lowered his head and answered honestly. "Since they didn't bring any carriages with them, how much ammunition could they bring with them? How is it possible that they can't finish shooting? Could it be that the soldiers below are too afraid of death and can't charge properly?" Zhu Huiqiu couldn't understand and wanted to put all the blame on the soldiers' morale. "No, Your Majesty, the soldiers are already putting their lives on the line. Out of the 5,000 soldiers, I have prepared a team of 500 soldiers. Once they are found to be cowardly and not daring to charge, they will be punished according to military law." Wang Zhangjiang naturally tried his best to explain. He didn't want to be punished because of this and be punished by the king. Zhu Huiqiu still trusted Wang Zhangjiang. Otherwise, he wouldn't have entrusted him with such an important task. However, it was because of this that he couldn't figure out the reason. Now that Wang Zhangjiang was standing in front of him, he suppressed the dissatisfaction in his heart and asked, "General Wang, why are you here?" "Your Majesty, I'm here to ask for reinforcements. I only have less than 2,000 soldiers. The 500 Black Cavalry should be unharmed. Under such circumstances, we don't have the ability to launch an attack, so..." "Approved. Take this King's Tiger tally and I'll give you 10,000 soldiers. General Wang, everything depends on you. Capture Yang Qindong alive and you will be the greatest contributor. Do you understand?" Zhu Huiqiu didn't wait for Wang Zhangjiang to finish speaking and nodded in agreement. In order to capture Yang Qindong alive, it would be worth it even if he had to use all 50,000 soldiers in the city. Hearing that there were 10,000 reinforcements, Wang Zhangjiang was naturally overjoyed. He immediately said with a solemn expression, "Thank you for your support, Your Majesty." "Don't worry, Your Majesty. With these 10,000 soldiers, I'm 80% more confident that we can capture Yang Qindong alive. Then this prince will wait for the good news from General Wang." "Oh right. Remember, you must stop the attack after daybreak." Zhu Huiqiu reminded him. The situation in the city wasn't very stable. When they attacked in the dark, the civilians couldn't see what was going on. They could only be suspicious, which was easy to deal with. However, once they attacked in the day, who knew what the civilians would do? The situation hadn't reached the most critical point yet, so there was no need to take the risk of attacking in the day. Wang Zhangjiang quickly nodded in agreement. He naturally understood this logic. During the day, he was the one who had led the soldiers to persuade the 5,000 civilians to return. How could he not know that if they attacked in the day and the civilians reacted, wouldn't the situation become even more chaotic? Wang Zhangjiang took the Tiger Troop talisman and left. 2 hours later, at midnight, he brought 10,000 soldiers to the courtyard. With the arrival of so many soldiers, the streets near the courtyard were quickly filled with soldiers. With so many reinforcements in hand, Wang Zhangjiang's confidence was greatly boosted. With a wave of his hand, he sent out 2,000 soldiers and once again launched a fierce attack on the courtyard. Gunshots sounded once again, from sporadic to concentrated, indicating the intensity of the battle. A few hundred steps away in the courtyard, Yang Qindong wasn't sleeping. Instead, he stood in the courtyard and looked up at the bright moon hanging high in the sky. It was the 14th day of the lunar calendar. The moon in the sky was very bright, but Yang Qindong's heart was a little heavy. The moment Zhu Huiqiu began to turn hostile, Wang Shan had already sent a message to the main force of the 5-star army waiting in Langsun. Presumably, they had already set off. A total of more than 200,000 soldiers should have already entered the three provinces. With the speed of the 1st Cavalry Army and the new army's cavalry, they should be able to reach Yunnan Manor in 3 days. At that time, there would be a lot of fighting and killing. When he thought about how many Han people would die in this battle, Yang Chendong's mood was not good. The reason why Yang Chendong had conquered the surrounding areas of the Great Ming Dynasty was because he wanted to take over this place with the smallest price. After all, the people who had lived here for generations were all Han people. The death of any one of them would be a loss to the Han people. If he wanted to bring the Han people to the peak of the world, he needed to have a certain proportion of Han people. Only then would he be considered the king of the world. Originally, he thought that after conquering the surrounding areas and showing enough strength, the Great Ming Dynasty would be afraid of him. At that time, he would only need to pay a small price to peacefully take over this place, allowing more Han people to live better lives and obtain the greatest respect. Chapter 1569. However, he did not expect the Great Ming Dynasty to be so courageous. It could also be said that the two emperors of the Great Ming Dynasty were people who would not shed tears until they saw the coffin. They were not frightened by the strength of the 5-star army and even wanted to struggle. Since that was the case, Yang Chendong would not go easy on them. Taking care of the 3 provincial kings first was to make an example out of them. No matter what, Zhu Huiqiu was still a descendant of the Zhu family. Although he killed his brother, it did not change the fact that he was a member of the Zhu family. Yang Chendong only hoped that after taking care of Zhu Huiqiu with an iron fist, Zhu Qizhen and Zhu Qiyu could see the difference between them and finally surrender peacefully. Looking at the bright moon, Yang Chendong stood with his hands behind his back. His whole person was enveloped by the moon. The 3 provincial armies' attack was still ongoing. They had the idea of using manpower to consume firearms and ammunition. Wave after wave of attacks did not stop. Ba Daojiang's team had already been replaced. After repelling 4 waves of enemy attacks, the soldiers were very tired. Firing guns for a long time was also a physical activity. It was normal for their arms to be numb and their hands to be weak. At 2:00 in the morning, Dao Xiao brought another 100 black cavalry to replace them. When dawn broke, the attack of the 3 provincial armies finally came to an end. The entire courtyard was filled with corpses, and there was even a tall pile of corpses. The stench was so strong that it could be smelled from miles away. It was really nauseating. Outside the courtyard, Wang Zhangjiang was pinching his nose as he ordered the soldiers to clean up the battlefield. Below the courtyard wall, countless corpses were piled up. They were all the soldiers of the 3 provincial armies who had died last night. Looking at the corpses, Wang Zhangjiang's face was bitter. His legs were a little numb. In just one night, out of the 15,000 soldiers from the 3 provinces, more than 12,000 of them had died. This was because he had intentionally slowed down his attack speed in the later stages of the battle. Otherwise, he was afraid that not a single one of the remaining 2,000 or so people would have survived. 15,000 against 500. With a ratio of 30 to 1, Wang Zhangjiang's side actually lost 5/6 of their soldiers. Not to mention that Wang Zhangjiang had never fought such a war before, he had never even heard of it. He did not know how to face Zhu Huiqian and explain to the king. Clean up the battlefield. Make sure to clean up the corpses. At the same time, stay far away from the courtyard. Give the enemy enough time to clean up the battlefield. After giving this order to the soldiers below, Wang Zhangjiang urged his horse to head towards the 3 provinces. Not long after Wang Zhangjiang left, a raging fire also ignited in the small courtyard. The number of soldiers in the black cavalry was limited. Naturally, they could not bury all the enemy corpses that had charged into their ranks. Considering that the weather was starting to heat up, they were afraid that the corpses would attract a plague. After reporting to Yang Chendong, the soldiers used a large fire to solve the problem. They burned all the enemy corpses with cremation. The smell of the burning corpses was quite unpleasant. When a breeze blew, the air in the entire southern cloud manor changed. Therefore, no matter whether it was near or far from the small courtyard, the people in the city all knew that someone had attacked the small courtyard where Bugnam of Gojoseon lived last night. Immediately, for their own safety, many people walked onto the streets and asked for help from the three provinces. Zhu Huichen had expected the people's actions. In the morning, he sent another general, Kai Wenju, to lead 5,000 soldiers to tightly seal off the main streets near the three provinces to prevent anyone from disturbing him. As for himself, he summoned Shen Tian, Meng Neng, Wu Yingtu, Mo Gui, and General Wang Zhangjiang who had just arrived to report. His right-hand men all arrived. The servants of the manor served tea and snacks. Everyone sat together to discuss the next step. Just as everyone's attention was on Wang Zhangjiang's report, the servants left one by one. One of the stewards first went to the servants' room to say goodbye, saying that he was going out to buy some things. Then, he walked out of the manor openly. This steward's name was Zhu Changzhou. He had been with Zhu Huichen for more than 10 years. He was definitely an old man. This could be seen from the fact that he was given the surname Zhu. He also enjoyed a certain amount of power in the manor. For someone like this, his every move would not be suspected. However, this Zhu Changzhou had actually been bribed by Yang San. Yes, bribed. In order to get in touch with this person, the intelligence department spent a lot of effort. Yang San specially appointed a group of 7 people to get in touch with this person and related matters. For the sake of confidentiality, this group of 7 people was directly led by Yang San. In the entire Yangxia, other than Yang San, only Yang Chendong knew about this matter. However, he only knew about the existence of this group. As for who the specific members were and who they were in contact with, Yang Chendong did not know. This operation could be said to have reached the highest level of security in order to prevent information from leaking out. In the situation of knowing that there was a traitor, but not knowing who it was, Yang Chendong could not completely trust anyone. It was such a small group that did a lot of work for Zhu Changzhou. They investigated everything related to this person's life. It was not easy to find out that before this person came to Zhu Huichen, he had a sister who was 3 years younger than him. At that time, because the family was hit by a flood, the two were separated during the escape. There was no news for a long time. When this news was seen by Bureau Chief Yang San, he felt that there was a lot to be done. At that moment, he put in a lot of effort and mobilized a lot of manpower and material resources to investigate this matter. His hard work paid off, and he really did manage to find out. Coincidentally, this woman was still alive, and she even came to Crimson City by accident. Now, she was already married, and she was a middle-level leader in the textile factory. After hearing this news, Yang San was overjoyed. He brought all the information and paintings about this woman, which was Wang Ling, to Yunnan Manor. Under the arrangement of the 7 small secret group, he met with Zhu Changzhou, this person whose original name should be Wang Chang. When Zhu Changzhou was blocked by Yang San in an alley, he instinctively wanted to shout. Based on his familiarity with the surrounding environment, he knew that there was a street 30 steps behind him. There must be soldiers patrolling on the street. His shout was likely to attract their attention. Just when Zhu Changzhou wanted to shout, Yang San handed over the paintings in his hand. There were a total of 4 paintings. One of them was Wang Ling's current appearance, another was a painting of his parents together in his memory, another was a painting of her and her brother, who was Zhu Changzhou, playing by the river in front of the courtyard when they were young, and the last one was a painting of Zhu Changzhou before they separated. Wang Ling was now a middle-level leader in the textile factory. Her husband's family was an ordinary leader in the city lord's residence. She also gave birth to 3 cute children and they were all studying in Yangxia's school. It could be said that she had received a lot of favors from Yang Chendong. Now that there was something that needed her help, she would do her best to help. When the 4 paintings appeared in front of Zhu Changzhou, the door of his dusty memory was opened. For a moment, he shut his mouth. Just like this, Zhu Changzhou, who didn't resist, had a long chat with Yang San in a secret and safe place. When he found out that his sister was living well and had given birth to 2 little nephews and a niece for him, Zhu Changzhou cried tears of joy. All these years, it wasn't that he didn't think of looking for his sister. This matter had even alarmed Zhu Huiyun. He had sent people to look for her, but there had been no news. Over time, everyone thought that this woman must have died and was no longer in this world. But happiness came so suddenly. Tell me, what do you need me to do? Zhu Chengjiu was also a smart person. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been recognized by Zhu Huiyun. He looked at Yang San and asked in a deep voice. Outsiders didn't know what the two of them talked about. Anyway, after Zhu Chengjiu left the house, he became Yang San's spy. His main task was to find out what other forces were secretly in contact with Zhu Huiyun other than the subordinates of the three provincial kings. Regarding this matter, Zhu Chengjiu felt somewhat guilty. After all, Zhu Huiyun had treated him well. But when he thought of Yang San's promise that not only could his sister live a better life in Qiqian City, but after the matter in Yunnan, he could also go to Qiqian City to reunite with his sister. In the end, his emotions won over his rationality. Moreover, he only wanted to find that mysterious person, not to do anything to Zhu Huiyun. After thinking this through, Zhu Chengjiu accepted this task. Today, he left the mansion to report to Yang San. This was the first time he saw Mo Gui in the main hall. Judging from everyone's reaction, this should be the person Yang San was talking about. In the past, Mo Gui had been hiding in the three provincial kings' mansions. Because he lived in a place where outsiders couldn't get close, Zhu Chengjiu didn't know. Yang San spent a lot of effort but still couldn't get any news. But now, perhaps because Yang Qindong was surrounded in the courtyard, everyone thought that he couldn't escape. So, they didn't hide Mo Gui and let him come out to meet everyone. Even so, if it weren't for the spies in the king's mansion, it would be impossible to find out about this person's appearance. In the king's mansion, Zhu Huiyun didn't know that Mo Gui had been exposed. He was listening to Wang Zhangjiang's report of last night's battle. When they heard that after a night of fighting, after launching more than 10 attacks and losing more than 12,000 men, they still couldn't break through the defense lines set up by the Black Cavalry Dragon Guards, everyone present fell silent. Obviously, the reality was different from what they had expected. The Black Cavalry Dragon Guards were not as limited as they had imagined. On the contrary, they should have had plenty of gunpowder. Chapter 1570. As for how the Black Cavalry did this, it was a mystery that everyone couldn't figure out. The most important question now wasn't to find the answer, but what to do next. Although the transmission of information was too slow and it was impossible to know if the news had already spread, from the information provided by Mo Gui, Yang Qindong might have already made his move. That man had a telegraph. According to Mo Gui, that thing could transmit messages from thousands of miles away or even further away. Last night's attack had already made their position clear. That was, the negotiation was completely fake. Their real goal was to capture Yang Qindong alive. With Yang Qindong's intelligence, he probably already had his suspicions. Last night's attack proved everything. In that case, the 5-star army would most likely make their move. There wasn't much time left for the three provincial armies. Everyone at the meeting knew that if they fought head-on, they definitely wouldn't be a match for the 5-star army. This had been proven by countless countries and factions that had been destroyed. In that case, other than capturing Yang Qindong, they had no other choice. We must capture Yang Qindong. Zhu Huichen suddenly stood up with a ferocious expression. Then, as if he had made a decision, he spat out 4 words, regardless of life or death. Finally, Zhu Huichen didn't dare to wait any longer. If he couldn't capture Yang Qindong within the time limit, once the main force of the 5-star army arrived outside Yunnan Manor, he wouldn't have a chance to make his move. On the other hand, as long as Yang Qindong died, even if he didn't capture him alive, as long as he could leave Yunnan Manor before the main force of the 5-star army arrived, he would effectively avoid the first attack. Then, there would be internal strife in Yangxia. When they split apart, it would be time for him to make his move. Zhu Huichen finally made his final decision. This made Mo Gui, who was sitting on the side like a guest, feel joy in his heart. The task given to him by his master was to kill Yang Qindong, not to capture him alive. Unfortunately, Zhu Huichun didn't listen to him on this matter, so he could only watch from the side. Now that both sides had the same goal, he could do whatever he wanted. It should be time to do something. Mo Gui had just made up his mind when Zhu Huihua looked at him. Mr. Mo, I've decided to kill Yang Chendong. Shouldn't you do something? Of course. Mo Gui nodded with a smile. Congratulations, Your Highness. You've made the right decision. If you want to capture Yang Chendong alive, it is indeed somewhat difficult, but if you want to kill Wu Nan Wang who is hiding in the small courtyard, it is not very difficult. What do you mean, Mr. Mo? Zhu Huichun asked expectantly. He already knew that Mo Gui's master wanted Yang Chendong dead, but he wanted to gain more benefits, so he didn't make up his mind. Now that they had the same idea, he believed that Mo Gui would do something to help him. Your Highness, my master has just sent a batch of cannons. They are in a workshop in the east of Yunnan Prefecture. I'll have to trouble General Wang to make a trip there. Mo Gui was still smiling as he told Zhu Huichun the answer he wanted. What did he mean by, just send a batch of cannons? Only an idiot would believe that. Although the current southern cloud manor wasn't heavily guarded, it would be harder than ascending to the heavens to send something as large as a cannon into the city without anyone's knowledge. This could only mean that the cannons were already in the city, but Mo Gui's master wasn't satisfied with Zhu Huichun's idea, so he didn't reveal his trump card. Zhu Huichun quickly figured out the crux of the matter, but he still pretended to be happy and laughed. Good, good. Mr. Mo's cannons are just in time. General Wang, go to the east of the city immediately and move the cannons outside the courtyard. Tonight will be the night Yang Chendong dies. Yes, sir. Wang Zhangjiang stood up with excitement on his face. He had been worried about what to do at night. Looking at the black cavalry, as long as they didn't lack ammunition, it would take a lot of soldiers to charge in. But with the cannons, things were different. With the cannons, they could ignore the enemy's firearms. The courtyard wasn't that big, so they could just bombard it. Then, he could eliminate the black cavalry without touching a single hair of the enemy. With a face full of joy, Wang Zhangjiang accepted the order and left. Not long after, he arrived at the workshop in the east of the city that Mo Gui mentioned. He found 10 cannons and 300 rounds of ammunition in the courtyard. Whether it was the number of cannons or the number of cannons, Wang Zhangjiang was overjoyed. They had wanted to stockpile cannons before, but the Southern Ming Empire had imposed a blockade on them, and the 5-star army didn't have any intention of selling cannons, so they could only wait. Now that they finally had the cannons, General Wang felt that his body was full of energy. The cannons were found and transported from the east of the city to Yang Chendong's courtyard in the west of the city. The news quickly reached Yang San's ears. The spies he had hidden in the 3 provinces' armies were finally useful. The news was also sent to Yang Chendong through the radio. 6th Young Master, urgent call. Telecommunications Director Wang Shan nervously sent the newly copied telegram to Yang Chendong. Don't panic, the sky won't collapse. Yang Chendong said confidently. He reached out and took the telegram. When he read the contents clearly, his eyebrows couldn't help but raise high. Then, he fell into deep thought. There were no cannons in the 3 provinces' armies, the only ones that had been used to attack Beijiang Prefecture had all been blown up. This could be seen from the previous intelligence department and various reports. This was also one of the reasons why Yang Chendong dared to enter the city with only 500 black cavalry soldiers. However, the other party now had 30 cannons and 300 rounds of ammunition, which made the situation serious. This didn't mean that Yang Chendong was afraid of these artillery shells. These days, Beta Persei didn't participate in the battle and command the battle. Instead, he led the 300 black cavalry soldiers to continuously dig tunnels. Wasn't it to prevent such a thing from happening? Yang Chendong was now thinking about the source of these cannons. Yang San had made it very clear in the telegram that these cannons were not the field cannons of the 5-star army, but the red coat cannons created by the Southern Ming dynasty. In recent years, due to the emergence of the Five-Star Army's firearms, both Biming and the Southern Ming dynasty had been forced to invest a lot of resources in the research of cannons. Now, they both had a large number of cannons, but due to the lack of technology, most of these cannons were solid shells, and the range was very limited. Not to mention the power of the cannons, or whether Yang Qindong had prepared for it, the source of these cannons alone was enough to make one ponder over it carefully. Did the Southern Ming dynasty support the three provinces' armies to kill him? Or did the traitor help Zhu Huiming get them? If it was the former, it would be fine. After dealing with the three provinces' armies, he could use this as an excuse to start a war with the Southern Ming dynasty. However, if it was the latter, then the identity of the traitor was somewhat interesting. The traitor understood the situation in the Yangxia dynasty very well, could speak with the Southern Ming dynasty, and could even obtain such an important weapon like the cannons. Who could this traitor be? For some reason, with the appearance of these cannons, Yang Qindong had a feeling that he could confirm the identity of the traitor one step closer. He could see who in the Yangxia dynasty had contact with the Southern Ming dynasty and then identify them one by one. The 30 cannons were pushed out of the small courtyard, and Wang Zhangjiang was only waiting for the sky to turn dark. In order to ensure the success of tonight's operation, Zhu Huiming gave another 10,000 soldiers to Wang Zhangjiang, which made him more confident. Zhu Huiming was also very nervous as he waited for the good news to arrive in the palace. While he was waiting, the sky turned dark as promised. When the curfew arrived and there were no civilians on the streets, Wang Zhangjiang impatiently went in front of the cannons and gave the order to fire. There was no prelude, no warning. The moment the cannons came, it was to give the 500 black cavalry in the small courtyard a head-on blow. The attack last night caused Wang Zhangjiang's losses to be too great. With this hatred, he was determined to uproot Bugnam of Gojoseon. Boom boom boom, under the irregular cannon fire, the outer walls of the 4 courtyards and the 3 courtyards quickly collapsed. The solid metal cannons wreaked havoc in the small courtyards as if there was no one there. It was as if they were the boss and those who blocked them would die. Originally, the 3 provincial armies did not have any artillery units, and there was no real standard for how to use these cannons. As a result, the cannons that were fired could fly anywhere. This was also why the attack this time was so powerful. After a few waves of attack, the outer walls of the 2 courtyards collapsed. Many houses were also knocked down by the cannons, causing rumbling sounds of the walls collapsing. Smoke and dust rose into the sky. Even though it was the 15th day of the lunar calendar and the moonlight was very bright, people's vision was still very limited. Looking at this rather spectacular scene, Wang Zhangjiang's heart was filled with pride. He could not wait to see the scene of the Black Knight Dragon Guards being crushed by him. Without the help of firearms, his 10,000 men would only be able to deal with a few hundred Black Knight Dragon Guards. He was confident that he could achieve victory. Each cannon fired a total of 5 cannons, and half of the solid metal cannons were wasted just like that. It also cleared a wide enough space for attack. Wang Zhangjiang immediately stopped the cannons from firing. Then, with a loud shout, the infantry charged forward. Chapter 1571. If they hadn't received the news in advance, it would have been like last night. The Black Cavalry Dragon Guards would have set up a firepower net and blockade outside. In the face of this sudden solid bullet attack, they would have suffered heavy losses. It wasn't impossible for them to lose their defensive line tonight. However, after receiving the news a step earlier, everything was a different picture. Long before the sky turned dark, most of the Black Cavalry had already hidden in the tunnel that Beta Persei had dug. This kind of tunnel was similar to the bomb shelters of the future. Even if it was a burst of fire, it could block it, not to mention a solid bullet. It could not hurt the people hiding here at all. Most of the Black Cavalry were hiding. Only less than 50 Black Cavalry were sent outside. They hid in various houses and used the solid walls to observe the movements outside. This was also to prevent the enemy from launching an attack, so that they could be the first to stop them. It was worth mentioning that these Black Cavalry were no longer holding Type 95 in their hands. Instead, each of them had a rocket launcher. The rocket launcher could easily hit more than 100 steps away. It made them look like they were holding a small mobile cannon with great power. When the cannons of the 3 provincial armies began to fire, the 50 Black Knight Dragon Guards were hiding in the small houses. Although more than 100 solid shells were fired and caused some damage, there were no casualties among the 50 Black Knight Dragon Guards as they were covered by the strong walls. Only 2 of the soldiers were choked by the smoke and couldn't stop coughing. Then, the assault of the 3 provinces began. The 50 of them immediately fired their rockets, and when the cannons landed in the midst of the enemy camp, the shockwaves from the explosion killed, injured, and scattered the black shadows. When the rocket launcher sounded outside, it was equivalent to giving the black cavalry hiding in the bomb shelter the order to charge and counterattack. Everyone came out of the tunnel in a line, each holding a Type 95 or a light machine gun. They found the predetermined position to counterattack and began to madly fire and counterattack. The sound of cannons and concentrated gunfire was constantly heard, giving the charging soldiers of the 3 provinces a head-on blow. Completely unprepared, they were caught off guard. Just the thousands of soldiers from the 3 provinces who were charging at the front were wiped out in a single exchange. Not a single one of them survived. The Black Cavalry's methods and enhanced firepower really frightened the soldiers of the 3 provinces. They could not help but stop in their tracks. Then, without waiting for orders, they frantically retreated. After a round of bombardment and a round of charge, they had suffered more than 1,000 casualties. When this result was reported to Wang Zhangjiang, it made him even angrier. His face also revealed a crazy expression. Boom, continue to bombard them. Destroy all the houses. I want to see where they can hide. The wave of bombardment just now had already destroyed more than 1/3 of the houses in the 2 courtyards. This allowed the soldiers of the 3 provinces to charge more than 10 steps without any threat. Wang Zhangjiang wanted to use the same method to continue to charge forward, slowly nibbling away the space for the Black Cavalry to survive, and finally gain the initiative of the battle. The cannons were pushed forward again. Each of the 30 cannons fired 2 shells, which meant 60 solid shells rolled in front of the houses. Without the obstruction of the courtyard walls, more than 10 houses were destroyed. This time, the Black Cavalry did not have a record of 0 casualties. 2 soldiers were injured, and 1 soldier's injury was not too light. Fire at the enemy's cannons, blow them up. Looking at the rocket launcher, Beta Persei roared in anger. The Black Cavalry were his good brothers, and Beta Persei knew every one of them by name. Now that his brothers were injured, as the actual commander of the Black Cavalry, how could he not be angry? The Black Knight Dragon Guards, who were also enraged, fired their rocket launchers. They had been waiting for this order. In an instant, several people rushed forward. Under the moonlight, they came within 80 steps of the 30 cannons. Then, they angrily fired their rockets and smashed into the cannons, causing a series of loud sounds of metal colliding. The sudden bombardment directly destroyed several cannons, and even some of the soldiers standing in front of the cannons were blasted into the air by the powerful explosion. When they fell to the ground, they were already dead. Good job, continue. Seeing that there was an effect, Beta Persei continued to shout excitedly. Several more rocket launchers were fired, and the cannons were destroyed one after another. Wang Zhangjiang saw all this, and it made his heart ache. He only had a total of 30 cannons. This was all he had, and it was also all the property of the king of the 3 provinces. If all these were wasted here, he was afraid that he would not be able to explain it to the king. Therefore, with a pained expression on his face, he ordered his men to continue to charge forward, looking for the Black Cavalry's gunner, and at the same time, distracting the enemy. Then he led his men to move the cannons back, saving the remaining 12 cannons and the 60 shells that were not destroyed. The Black Cavalry's full-scale counterattack was effective. They defeated the arrogance of the 3 provinces and took back some territory. But after all, it was a fact that so many houses were destroyed. After waiting for less than half an hour, the third charge organized by Wang Zhangjiang began. When the soldiers of the three provinces came from all directions, the pressure on the black cavalry multiplied. When there were enemies on all sides, it was not as easy as before to block the enemy outside the position. The sound of the light and heavy machine guns was much more intense than last night. Beta Persei led the 200 black cavalry who were originally digging the tunnel to join the battle, and only then did they manage to stabilize the situation. Under the moonlight, the sparks from the bullets could be seen everywhere. The soldiers of the three provinces who rushed from all directions fell one after another, but then they rushed up one after another. At this point in the battle, human lives were the most worthless. At this time, everyone seemed to be red-eyed. Other than shooting, they were charging, and they looked like they would not stop until they fought to the death. Yang Qindong was also standing in the tunnel at this moment. Beside him, Telecommunications Director Wang Shan looked at him expectantly, waiting for orders at any time. But after waiting for a long time, seeing that Yang Qindong did not give any orders, Wang Shan could only look up and down again. As Wang Shan expected, Yang Qindong did indeed have a backup plan in Yunnan manner. Once he mobilized this force, it would be very powerful. But he did not do that, not for anything else, but because he felt that things had not reached the final juncture yet. Just like how he had a backup plan, he had a feeling that his opponent also had a backup plan that had yet to be used. He was waiting, planning before moving. The attack was still going on, and the number of deaths was constantly increasing. General Wang Zhangjiang's face was already covered in cold sweat. Originally, he thought that with the help of the artillery, tonight's attack would be as easy as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. Even if he could not capture Yang Qindong alive, he could still kill him. But who would have thought that the other party was clearly prepared? After fighting for nearly 3 hours, there were less than 5,000 soldiers left in his hands. At this rate, he was afraid that when dawn came, not only would he not achieve the expected victory, but he would also not have any soldiers to use. In the past, he had always heard about how powerful the 5-star army was and how powerful their firearms were. But before he really saw it, he did not believe it in his heart. But after 2 consecutive nights of attack, he finally knew how powerful the opponent was. He also finally understood why so many forces and countries would be defeated and even destroyed when facing the 5-star army. Would the 3 provincial armies be wiped out as well? Once this thought appeared in his mind, he could not get rid of it. Wang Zhangjiang's face only became more unsightly. In the prince's mansion, Zhu Huixing was still waiting for the good news in the main hall. However, after sending out wave after wave of people and obtaining the current situation, his expression could no longer be as calm as before. When the sky began to slowly brighten, and the sound of roosters crowing could be heard in the city, he fell into a chair with a thump. He knew that another opportunity had passed in front of him just like that. The sky was already bright, and there was no turning back. Zhu Huixing had no choice but to give the order to retreat. He believed that he still had a chance. Before he lost all hope, he did not want the people to see this scene and cause a revolt. If that happened, who knew what would happen? Early in the morning, the generals came to the 3 provincial princes' mansion again. As usual, Wang Zhangjiang, whose eyes were bloodshot, was the first to give the report. Wang Zhangjiang, who had not rested for 2 consecutive days, felt tired both physically and mentally. But in front of the king, he could only force himself to give a detailed report of last night's battle. When he said that the 30 cannons were all destroyed by the 5-star army and that the soldiers suffered heavy losses in one night, the faces of the people in the meeting became very unsightly. The difference between reality and the plan was too big, so big that everyone could not accept it at the moment. Even though the gunshots rang out until dawn, everyone was mentally prepared for the attack to be unfavorable. But from Wang Zhangjiang's retelling, the result was worse than what they had expected. It seemed that the attack last night, other than destroying the outer walls of the 2 small courtyards and destroying some houses, did not hurt the black cavalry. Oh! Maybe they were hurt, but they did not see it, so they did not calculate it. Everyone comforted themselves in this way. When Zhu Huixing looked at everyone, he gave a different opinion. It's already been 2 days, we don't have much time left. Everyone, what should we do next? There were only 500 opponents, and they were right under his nose, heavily surrounded. However, he just couldn't eat them. This feeling made Zhu Huiyun very unhappy. When he looked at the crowd and spoke, his tone was filled with impatience. Chapter 1572. That's right, Zhu Huihua was anxious. This was because in the morning, when the sun had just risen, the scouts had entered the city and reported that the main force of the 5-star army had begun to move towards the 3 provinces from Liang Mountain. The distance between Liang Mountain and Yunnan Manor was a few hundred li, but the news that came was that the cavalry of the 5-star army was coming on horseback. Who knew if they would suddenly appear in front of him? If he couldn't get rid of Yang Qindong before these people arrived, then it would really be troublesome. This time, he had invited Yang Qindong to negotiate, but now, he had to kill him. In terms of morality, he had already lost. If Yang Qindong didn't die, and the 5-star army arrived outside the city, then the one who would die would be him. Time was of the essence, and Zhu Huihua didn't have the time to think about other things. Right now, what he needed to do was to kill Yang Qindong. Only then would Yang Xie be in chaos, and he would be safe. Only then would he be able to obtain everything he wanted. Tonight, mobilize all the forces that can be mobilized. We must kill Yang Qindong. These words were squeezed out from between his teeth, and Zhu Huihua's expression became more and more ruthless. In this kind of game, where it was either you die or I live, anyone could only use all their strength. After Zhu Huihua made his final decision, the entire army of the 3 provinces in Yunnan Manor began to move. In order to achieve the goal of exhausting the firearms and ammunition of the Black Cavalry, even the 10,000 new recruits were put to use. However, because they didn't have any combat experience, in order to prevent a large number of people from escaping when the battle started, they weren't placed on the main attack. Instead, they were responsible for the security of the outer perimeter. For 2 consecutive nights, the entire Yunnan Manor's commoners probably knew that Zhu Huihua wanted to kill Yang Qindong. No one knew what these commoners would do. Although these people were often seen as ants, no one could deny that once these commoners took action, they would cause a huge commotion and cause serious consequences. In order to prevent the civilians in the city from doing anything that would be detrimental to their operations, the 10,000 new soldiers that had just been recruited were put to use. Their main purpose was to protect the civilians in the city and prevent them from suddenly causing trouble. Rather than calling them new recruits, it would be more accurate to call them able-bodied men. These people were all captured from various places. They didn't want to join the army at first, but they were unlucky and were captured at the last minute. Among them, there were more than 3,000 able-bodied men captured near Mount Liang. However, everyone knew that more than half of these 3,000 people were cold front warriors. Moreover, they were under the command of Jianghu, the elite 1st Regiment of the 1st Regiment of the Cold Front. Back then, Jianghu had split up the Cold Front warriors and disguised them as local refugees. Furthermore, they had pretended that they were coincidentally found by the army of the 3 provinces. Just like that, they were captured as able-bodied men. Not only did they successfully enter Yunnan Manor without any checks, they were also stationed in the barracks in the city. Logically speaking, the army of the 3 provinces had a set of methods to manage the army. For example, after entering the barracks, they had to go through household registration and so on. With this set of procedures, it would be difficult for the Cold Front warriors to hide their target. Coincidentally, before the army could do anything, Yang Qindong arrived. This instantly attracted everyone's attention, and no one cared about the new recruits anymore. They also helped Chenghu's troops cover for him and stayed in the army. In the past 2 days, the news of Zhu Huihua wanting to kill Yang Qindong had already spread throughout the army. To the ordinary soldiers, this was simply a fight between gods. They only needed to follow orders. The main goal of the Yang Xie had always been to let the Han people live better lives and let them become the rulers of this world. However, to the soldiers of the 3 provinces who were not Yang Xie soldiers, they did not have the opportunity to experience this kind of glory. On the contrary, they had been receiving military pay from Zhu Huihua, the king of the 3 provinces. Naturally, they had been paid to do something. However, as 10,000 new recruits, they had not even received a single cent of military pay. This was naturally because they had only been here for a short period of time. However, this gave Jianghu and the others an opportunity to instigate a rebellion. If they were dealing with veteran soldiers, Jianghu and the others would have to think twice before doing anything. However, they did not have to be so careful when dealing with a bunch of new recruits who had been captured under the same fate. They could do many things boldly. Over the past 2 days, Jianghu and the others had been trying to instigate a rebellion. However, to be on the safe side, they did not reveal their identities. Instead, they used the identity of someone who had suffered a similar fate to build a relationship with the new recruits. For something like a grievance gathering, no other army in the Yangtze had done better than the Langfeng army. Within the Langfeng army, the 1st Division had done the best. For example, during their usual training, they had an assessment on how to gain the support of more strangers in the shortest time possible to strengthen their own forces. All of this was now put to good use. Under Jianghu's persuasion, more than 8,000 of the 10,000 new recruits were convinced. These people's hearts were already moved, and they were filled with all kinds of desires to become a part of the Yang faction's people. Under the propaganda of Jianghu and the others, the slogan of saving Bugnam of Gojoseon and making a contribution to the Yang Xia army quickly spread to the people. When they found out that their 10,000 new recruits were also participating in the battle tonight, but were only responsible for the security of the outer perimeter, Jianghu was so happy that he almost jumped up. This was really a case of someone sending a pillow when you were sleepy. They were just worrying about how to get out of the military camp, and now the opportunity was right in front of them. When Jianghu heard the news, he immediately sent someone to contact the secret agents of the security bureau in the city to ask for the next step of the plan. After 2 nights of continuous attacks, especially when the 3 provincial armies even used 30 cannons, the head of the security bureau, Ong San, who was in charge of everything in the city, felt his scalp go numb when he heard this. This method of luring the snake out of its hole and winning the hearts of the people was a good method. However, they should not have let the young master take the risk. For this reason, Yang San had objected to it, but it did not work. Since this was the case, he could only do his best to ensure Yang Chindong's safety. 2 nights had passed, and the 3rd night was about to arrive. Seeing that the 3 provincial armies would launch a new round of attacks in a few hours, Yang San had already made a decision in his heart. He was going to take action, and the only thing he could do was to instigate the people in Southern Cloud Prefecture to launch an attack. Although he did not know how many people would die in this way, as long as he could protect the young master, everything would be worth it. At this time, Jianghu sent someone to contact him using a special method. When he found out that the 1st Regiment of the 1st Division of the Langfeng Division was in the city and had secretly joined the 3 provincial armies as a new recruit, Yang San's bloodshot eyes could not help but brighten up. He was so happy that he exclaimed, "The heavens are really helping me. The heavens are really helping me, Yang Xia." After exclaiming, Yang San immediately ordered the secret agents of the intelligence department in the city to move out and spread rumors in the city. The main thing was that if something happened to Bugnam of Gojoseon in the city, the entire Yunnan prefecture would be razed to the ground. If that really happened, no one in the city would be spared. If they could take action to support Bugnam of Gojoseon, they would be meritorious subjects. Those who made great contributions would be rewarded with silver and land in the future. Although the current Great Ming dynasty was far from being as strong as before, it still had a certain foundation. At the very least, the state of society had not reached a point of no return. There were still some honest officials and capable officials. If the Great Ming dynasty was really on the verge of collapse, all they needed to do was to say that they would welcome Bugnam of Gojoseon into the city and the people in the city would be able to make use of them. In order to cooperate with the soldiers of the Langfeng Division, Yang San had used up all his trump cards. However, Zhu Huiqi did not know about this. Perhaps he had never cared about the people in the first place. In addition, an even greater danger was pressing down on him. In the great general's residence in Guizhou, Jiang Wuqing was currently meeting with a guest in the study. As the great general of Guizhou appointed by Zhu Huiqi, Jiang Wuqing's strength was not weak. With 100,000 soldiers in his hands, he was confident. Even he himself was tall and strong, with a dignified appearance. Jiang Wuqing was a forthright person. From time to time, one could hear him laughing loudly. As a result, he enjoyed an illustrious reputation in Guizhou. However, today, he could no longer laugh. This was because a familiar person had appeared in front of him. It was Yao Yingjun. As the Security Bureau's earliest spy and one of the most successful ones, Yao Yingjun was born with good looks. People called him Pan and the Reincarnation. Using this advantage, he successfully won the favor of Princess Yongsheng, Zhu Lian. He was also able to transmit the situation here to the higher-ups of Yangxia. Everything came to an end after Zhu Huiying killed his brother. After Yao Yingjun received the information from the Security Bureau, he immediately took Princess Yongsheng away. He quickly formed a group of people and had been roaming around Guizhou. At that time, Yao Yingjun could have brought Princess Yongsheng back to Yangxia's territory. Based on the important information he had transmitted over the years, the rewards he received would be enough for him to use for the rest of his life. However, he did not do that. Instead, he continued to be with Princess Yongsheng and raised the banner of opposing Zhu Huiqi. Needless to say, Yao Yingjun's act had become real. He had really fallen in love with this princess. Because of this, Yang Chendong also made a promise. No matter when, as long as he didn't want to work anymore and wanted to leave with Princess Yongsheng, he would personally give them permission to find a safe place to live the life of a rich man. Chapter 1573. Those who had done intelligence work knew that it was easy to enter but difficult to leave. After doing intelligence work for a day, it would be difficult for someone who had spent their entire life in intelligence work to leave safely. As such, many people envied Yao Yingjun because of this matter. Feeling grateful for Yang Chendong's kindness, Yao Yingjun decided to do better work to repay his kindness. This time, taking the initiative to meet Jiang Wuqing was a risky move by Yao Yingjun to repay his kindness. When Zhu Huiyan was still alive, Yao Yingjun knew Jiang Wuqing, but they did not have much interaction at that time. As such, when he appeared alone in the Jiang residence, Jiang Wuqing was shocked. Considering that Bugnam of Gojosian had already entered the Yunnan residence, and now that Yao Yingjun had taken the initiative to appear in front of him, Jiang Wuqing instantly thought of many things. "Come in with me." Jiang Wuqing didn't immediately call for his bodyguards to arrest them. He spoke with a very calm tone. He believed that since the other party had come, it would be in his hands and could be seized at any time. Since that was the case, there was no need to be anxious. It would be better to see what he had to say. Yao Yingjun understood Jiang Wuqing's behavior very well. He had done a lot of homework and fully understood the nature of this Guizhou general, which was why he dared to take the risk alone. Hearing this greeting, he immediately chuckled, cupped his fists, and strode into the residence's inner room. The study was extremely quiet. As the host, Jiang Wuqing boldly sat down on the main seat and placed his sword on the table. His intention was self-evident. If Yao Yingjun could not convince him and give him a reasonable reason, he would probably use force. In response, Yao Yingjun only smiled and found a place to sit down. He then said, "General, do you know that a great disaster is imminent?" Jiang Wuqing's surprise at Yao Yingjun's shocking words disappeared in an instant. He then laughed coldly and said, "What? Is that all you have to say?" Negotiators from ancient times to modern times would often say shocking words in order to put enough pressure on the other party and fight for enough action. Jiang Wuqing had read a lot and had seen things like this before, so he wasn't surprised. Jiang Wuqing's performance fell into Yao Yingjun's eyes. He sighed in his heart at this person's calmness. Then he said, "General, this one is not speaking arrogantly, but this is the truth." Bugnam of Gojosian was wise and mighty. In just a dozen years, he had conquered and occupied several territories the size of the Great Ming dynasty. He had more than 1,000,000 troops under his command, and more than 10 million people under his rule. Wherever Bugnam of Gojosian went, his enemies were either killed or beheaded. Even if he surrendered at the mere sight of the wind, in order to preserve his life. Who could be his opponent? When Jiang Wuqing heard the praises, he did not have any intention of objecting. All of this was the truth. It was placed right in front of them, and they had no choice but to accept it. On this point, even Jiang Wuqing had some admiration in his heart. After praising Yang Chendong, Yao Yingjun continued, "Today, my lord has come to Yunnan Manor. Presumably, I don't need to say more about what will happen next. General, you should know what will happen, right?" Faced with this question, Jiang Wuqing knew that he had to say something, so he said, "Brother Yao, you flatter me. As far as this general knows, my lord has already laid an inescapable net in Yunnan Manor, and Bugnam of Gojoseon only brought 500 followers into the city. Now that 2 days have passed, I'm afraid that Bugnam of Gojoseon is now under my lord's control." Jiang Wuqing only received the news that Yang Chendong had entered Yunnan Manor this morning. At that time, he was indeed shocked by Yang Chendong's spirit of risking his life alone, but at the same time, he was extremely impressed. Although Jiang Wuqing did not mention it to anyone else, he knew very well that this time, Yang Chendong appeared in Yunnan Manor and made such a risky move in order to save the people of the 3 provinces from the suffering of war. Unfortunately, Jiang Wuqing knew his master very well. This was a master who would kill his own brother without hesitation. Such a person only had interests in his eyes, so how could he be honest? He could not understand. If he could see this point, then the wise Bugnam of Gojoseon should also be able to see it, but why did he still risk his life? Just as he was wondering in his heart, Yao Yingjun arrived. A sense of curiosity arose in his heart. He wanted to see what Yao Yingjun thought about this matter and what he had to say. How could Jiang Wuqing know that it was precisely because he had just received the news from Yunnan Manor that Yao Yingjun appeared in order to force the other party to make a statement at the first moment? After all, Jiang Wuqing was a very magnanimous person who treated the people well. He was considered a good official, so it was better to try to win over such a person if he could. Ha ha ha. When Yao Yingjun heard this, he threw his head back and laughed heartily. Just as Jiang Wuqing was confused and somewhat confused, he suddenly stopped and said, "What's wrong? General, do you think that you can keep my master with the means of the 3 provincial kings?" To be honest, since my master dared to enter Yunnan Manor, he naturally made all kinds of preparations. How could he be easily controlled by others? If he did not have such means, how could he have today's achievements? Jiang Wuqing still believed Yao Yingjun's words from the bottom of his heart. He also did not believe that Yang Chendong, who had always been invincible, would take such a risk. However, he just could not think of any way to break out of this situation. Out of curiosity, he could not help but ask, "Oh? But what means does Bugnam of Gojoseon have?" Haha. Shaking his head, Yao Yingjun did not answer this question. In fact, he himself did not know what means Yang Chendong had left behind. If he did not know the reason, how could he solve other people's doubts? Yao Yingjun, who did not answer this question, only said, "General, just wait for the result." But then he mentioned the purpose of his visit, which was to persuade Jiang Wuqing to surrender. "General, since my master has come to Yunnan Manor, presumably there will be a result soon. And I can say with certainty that the final loser will be Zhu Huihua. Then, may I ask, once the 3 provincial kings are captured, what will the general do?" After saying these words, Yao Yingjun kept staring at Jiang Wuqing's eyes, as if he wanted to find the answer he wanted. What to do? This was what Jiang Wuqing needed to consider. The Great Ming Dynasty's system valued the civil and despised the military. It was destined that the social status of the military would not be too high. For example, if a scholar made a mistake, he would often be held high and let go lightly. This was because behind him were his schoolmates, fellow townsmen, peers, and colleagues. Even if he made a mistake one day and left a way out, they would all stand up and speak up. On the other hand, if a military general made a mistake, he would often be thrown into a bottomless abyss. It was even possible to go down to the 18 layers of hell. This was especially true for those civil officials. In order to suppress the status and development of military generals, they would spare no effort in using all their strength. This was also the reason why military generals received far less treatment and reputation compared to civil officials, even though they were both subjects. Jiang Wuqing was born a military general. In the past, he did not know how many military generals and ancestors were played in the palms of the civil officials, and even had their families destroyed. Among these people, some really did make mistakes, and some were directly wronged because they offended someone. And even if they really did make some mistakes, should they be punished? Also, should the families of these military generals be so heavily implicated? At best, they would be exiled and made into slaves. At worst, they would be killed. However, because the right to speak was in the hands of the civil officials, even if some military generals had different ideas, they could only endure it in their hearts. Therefore, even though they were both officials, a military general was much more cautious than a civil official. And now, Yao Yingjun was asking him what to do, which made it difficult for Jiang Wuqing. He was indeed promoted by Zhu Huihua. Before this, he was only a chiliarch. Now, he could command 50,000 soldiers and become the general of a province. With this kindness, he indeed had to thank Zhu Huihua. But of all things, Zhu Huihua should not have provoked Bugnam of Gojoseon. Who was that person? He was an existence that could easily destroy grassland wolves. How could their local army compare to such a person? Even if Bugnam of Gojoseon entered Yunnan Manor and something happened. But what about the other people in Yangxie? Would they take revenge? Moreover, he had already heard that Bugnam of Gojoseon had appointed a prince, which was his successor. Would they really collapse? Taking a step back, if Bugnam of Gojoseon's Yangxie collapsed, what good would it do to him? Based on the fact that he had once served Zhu Huihua, not only would Yangxie's people not forgive him, but the civil officials in the southern Ming dynasty would also not let him off easily. If he was lucky, he would be dismissed. If he was unlucky, then he and his family would die. Thinking of his 4 children, the youngest of whom was only 4 years old, how could Jiang Wuqing bear to see them die because of him? For some reason, Jiang Wuqing's heart was filled with a sense of desolation at this moment. When he thought that because of him, his family would be implicated and die, he felt a burst of anger in his chest that wanted to erupt. It made him feel a burst of air and his heart beat rapidly. Jiang Wuqing's heart could be said to be filled with complex feelings, and all of this fell clearly into Yao Yingjun's eyes. He felt that things could be done, so he laughed and said, "General, I don't think I need to say more about your situation. This time, the 3 provincial kings want to be enemies with my master, so they are destined to have a miserable end. How could such an unwise person be worthy of you working your life for him? Why don't you turn back now?" Bugnam of Gojoseon said that as long as General is willing to surrender, not only will he not make any mistakes, but he will also give you merit. Even if we are all Han, he will give you wealth and ensure the safety of General and your family. Chapter 1574. These words were just right, and they also touched Jiang Wuqing's heart, causing him to be moved. However, considering that he had once received Zhu Huilio's kindness, would it be too unjust to do so? Also, how trustworthy was Yao Yingjun's words? Jiang Wuqing had already opened his mouth to agree, but he closed it tightly again. There was no such thing as betrayal in this world. The only reason there was no betrayal was because the bargaining chip was not high enough. Or perhaps the threat was not high enough. If Yao Yingjun had not found him before, Jiang Wuqing might have had a choice and could have chosen the right time. However, now that Yao Yingjun had found him, he could only make a choice. He could either agree or not. Could he not agree? No one was willing to surrender. However, how could Jiang Wuqing, with a mere 50,000 soldiers, stop the 5-star army's might? Furthermore, the 50,000 soldiers under him belonged to the local army. In the end, their combat strength was only average. With such an army, Jiang Wuqing had already lost the confidence to fight against the experienced 5-star army before the battle even started. Whether it was because he had seen the situation clearly or because his strength was not enough, Jiang Wuqing had no choice but to make a decision. He looked at Yao Yingjun and asked, "But I don't know, if I choose to surrender to the 5-star army, what kind of guarantee can I get? Southern Cloud Manor. There were less than 2 hours left before the sky turned dark. A gloomy atmosphere shrouded the city, giving people a very oppressive feeling. For the past 2 days, the commotion at night was not small, especially last night. The sound of cannons and gunshots were so dense. Anyone who was not a fool would know what was going on. It must be said that the common people were the most honest group. As long as they could survive, they would not do anything excessive. For example, words like swallowing their anger and living an ignoble life were used by them. However, when something happened and threatened their lives, they would change into a different appearance and reveal their fangs. In other words, the mighty army of the East had awakened. Who was Bugnam of Gojoseon? Needless to say, everyone in Southern Cloud Manor knew. There were even many people who yearned for the Yangtze's life and thought of ways to seek refuge there. Originally, Yang Chendong had a good foundation of the people. This time, Yang Chendong was willing to take the risk in order to not let the common people of the 3 provinces suffer from the chaos of war. At this moment, he had won the hearts of the people. This was the general trend that Yang Chendong needed. Now that the general situation had been set, but the 3 provincial kings still wanted to kill Wu Nan Wang, how could the common people in the city be willing to do so? This was no longer a matter of 2 kings fighting. If things went wrong, the common people in the city would be affected. If they still did not do anything, in the end, the city would be killed. Once such a terrible result appeared in the minds of the common people, who could remain calm? It was at this time that the spies sent by Yang San came into effect. They mixed in with the common people and talked about the powerful relationship. More and more common people felt the crisis. Finally, waves of common people in the city began to rush in the direction of the destroyed courtyard with all kinds of weapons in their hands. Southern Cloud Manor was a big city. Not to mention its history, just the fact that it was the place where the former Sheeping Mansion and the current mansion of the 3 provinces were located, it had attracted a lot of commoners. The number of commoners here had reached more than 500,000 people at one point. Due to the chaos of war, the proportion of adult men was not high. However, even if the ratio was 10-1, it was still possible to gather 50,000 people. Not to mention, when the matter concerned their own safety and life and death, it was not only the adult men who would stand up. Some of the older men and some of the younger women also stood up together in order to seek a way out. They formed a mighty team and slowly rushed to the courtyard where Yang Chendong was. The kings of the 3 provinces who were paying close attention to the situation in the city quickly reported the matter to Zhu Huihua. In this regard, the kings of the 3 provinces who already had a countermeasure ordered to send out 20,000 veterans and 10,000 newly recruited able-bodied men to guard the periphery. Once they found that the common people dared to attack the former, they would be killed without mercy. At the same time, Zhu Huihua also gave the last 15,000 soldiers he had left to Wang Zhangjiang. The mission he gave him was to take Yang Chendong's life tonight, no matter what the cost. This was a desperate move, and no one stopped him. Although this was the last resort, at this moment, there was no better way to do it. But what Zhu Huihua did not know was that just tonight, 2 other assassination teams had also started to take action. They were the men of sacrifice of the Mu family led by Mu Ong and the 100 ninjas led by Mo Gui. The men of sacrifice of the Mu family led by Muong have been lurking in the city for several days, waiting for the right opportunity to take action. There was no doubt about it. Although the Mu family also looked down on Zhu Huihua and would take his life if there was a chance. But in the face of a more powerful opponent, Yang Chendong, they had no choice but to work together to deal with this big problem first. For this reason, Muong has made up his mind to succeed or die trying. Fortunately, after 2 consecutive nights of attack, the outer courtyard of Yang Chendong's residence has been conquered, and the range of activity has been reduced a lot compared to before. Under such conditions, once the men of sacrifice of the Mu family rush to Yang Chendong's side, they still have a high chance to kill the target and complete the mission. Let's talk about the 100 ninjas led by Mo Gui. This is a force that no one knows about. Ninjas are best at hiding. In addition to Mo Gui's arrangements, no one noticed them, even Yang Chendong didn't know about their existence. What's more worth mentioning is that the leader of this group of ninjas is the special ninja who has been on Yang Chendong's death list. This special ninja, who should have died in the assassination of the Timur Empire's General Mandulatu, has now come to Yunnan Mansion without anyone noticing. In the dark, he is like a poisonous snake. Once he sees the opportunity, he will decisively attack and release his powerful energy. These two dark forces, one left and one right, stared at the dilapidated small courtyard, waiting for the best opportunity to appear. In the small courtyard, Beta Persei, Dao Shao, Ba Dao Jiang, and others were also doing the final inspection. Years of war made them feel as if dark clouds were looming over the city. Everyone knew that the enemy's attack tonight would only be more ferocious compared to the attack of the previous 2 nights. Fortunately, they have enough firearms and ammunition in their hands, which is their strongest confidence. During the day, they have already dug trenches to ensure that the soldiers can hide in them and kill all the enemies under the premise of enough self-protection. Beta Persei, leave a gap in the east. It was unknown when Yang Chendong had changed into the golden cloak. Although the sky was turning dark, it was still dazzling. Under the illumination of the remaining light, it emitted a myriad of rays of light, giving people the feeling that he was a god descending to the mortal world. Young master, you. Beta Persei was surprised when he heard this. Once a gap is opened, it may give the enemy an opportunity to rush into the small courtyard. If that's the case, it will be too dangerous. Execute the order. Yang Chendong didn't explain too much. Of course, he knew what he was doing. This is indeed a little risky, but if he doesn't do this, how can he find the forces hidden in the dark? Moreover, with his Grandmaster level skills and the large warehouse that he can use at any time, is there really nothing to be afraid of? Perhaps this is the boldness of the skillful. Not to mention, who doesn't have a backup plan? Since it was Yang Chendong's order, regardless of whether Beta Persei is willing or not, he can only carry it out in the end. A gap naturally appeared in the east. However, it is not obvious, at least not at a glance. This is exactly what Yang Chendong needs. If the gap is too obvious, isn't it the same as telling others that this is a trap? The reason why Yang Chendong chose to take the risk this time is to see if he can find the whereabouts of the traitor. If his defense is foolproof, how could the traitor appear? The Black Cavalry, who have long been prepared for a tough battle, checked the weapons in their hands for the last time. The telecommunications director, Wang Shan, also came to Yang Chendong's side and reported the contents of a few telegrams that he just received. 6th Young Master, Yao Yingjun has persuaded Guizhou Province General Jiang Wuqing and has now taken over their military power. He has also sent 20,000 troops from Guizhou Province to Yunnan Prefecture. 6th Young Master, after a day and night of long-distance attacks, my main army is now less than 300 miles away from us. They are confident that they will arrive outside Yunnan Prefecture before noon yesterday. 6th Young Master, the Intelligence Department has sent news that Guangxi Province General Bai Kuan is now in close contact with the Southern Ming Imperial Court. It seems that there is a possibility of him being instigated at any time. 6th Young Master, listening to the contents of the telegrams read out, Yang Chendong calmly looked ahead. He knew that after taking a big detour and eliminating the surrounding dangers one by one, he would finally have to face the Southern Ming Imperial Court. Okay, got it. At this moment, Yang Chendong did not feel too much joy. After all, once the war broke out, the ones who would suffer would be the lowest class of Han people. It would not be like when they attacked other countries and factions, where they could do anything to achieve their goals. Wang Shan seemed to feel that Yang Chendong's mood was a little gloomy, so he quietly left after replying. On the other hand, Yang Er walked up in confusion and said loudly, "Young master, don't be anxious. With 500 Black Knight Dragon guards around, no one will be able to rush up to you and hurt you." Chapter 1575. His originally gloomy mood disappeared without a trace because of Beta Persei's interruption. But it was also at this moment that Yang Chendong thought of telling Beta Persei a few words. Otherwise, with this person's character, he would definitely ruin his grand plan. Beta Persei, if the enemy rushes in from the east later, young master, I will take them out of here, and you just need to guard this place well. Don't worry about me, understand? Yang Chendong said with a serious look on his face. If it were any other subordinate, he would only need to give an order for the other party to carry it out. But facing Beta Persei, who was a straightforward person, some things had to be said more specifically. Why? Beta Persei wanted to get to the bottom of this, but fortunately, he still knew his place and immediately shut his mouth. But this did not mean that he had given up. On the contrary, he said carefully, young master, isn't this too dangerous? Why don't you let Dao Xiao or Ba Dao Jiang lead the team? I'd better stay by your side. No need. In order to dispel Beta Persei's thoughts and not let him take the risk, Yang Chendong said in a very decisive tone, it's not like you don't know young master's speed. You can't keep up with me. Okay, just follow orders. Beta Persei's face immediately fell when he heard that he couldn't keep up. In terms of skill and strength, the Yang faction could be considered to be full of talents. Yang Heir was considered to be one of the top existences. There were very few people who could convince him to submit. Yang Chendong was an exception. The two of them had exchanged countless moves in private. In the past, they could deal with each other once or twice, but now, they could not even last one round against Beta Persei. This made Beta Persei angry and happy at the same time. He was angry because his skills were too weak. He should have been protecting the young master. However, most of the time, he had become an existence akin to a decoration. This made him, who boasted that he was strong enough to establish himself with his fists and feet, lose face. He was happy that the young master had such shocking skills. His safety was guaranteed, so he didn't have to worry so much. In terms of skill, he was indeed not on the same level as Yang Chendong. Although he was reluctant, Beta Persei still agreed. Yes, young master, but you must be careful. Don't worry. I know what I'm doing. Yang Chendong also breathed a sigh of relief. He was really worried that Beta Persei would disregard his orders and follow him. If that was the case, he would not be able to say anything about Beta Persei's loyalty. Now that he was on his own, he didn't have to worry so much. As for his skills, perhaps it was because he had been reborn, or perhaps it was because he had Daikra with him. In short, whether it was his speed, strength, or reaction time, his body was indeed frighteningly high. In addition, the battlefield and killing techniques that he had learned in his previous life were there to assist him. Unless it was a close-range attack, as long as he had a little bit of time and opportunity to react, no one would be able to kill him. Because of this, he dared to take such a risk. It was also because of this that he dared to open an opening in the face of tens of thousands of enemies with only 500 black cavalry and set an exposed trap for the people who wanted to harm him. Not to mention, there was still the existence of the backup plan. Just now, Director Wang Shan had reported that the backup plan was in place and that they were prepared at any time. With this, now he just had to wait for the enemy to fall into the trap. Perhaps he could use this opportunity to find out the identity of the traitor. Yang Chendong was ready for battle and made all kinds of preparations. Outside the small courtyard, Wang Zhangjiang led nearly 20,000 troops and was ready to charge. They had already failed for 2 consecutive nights. They had sent out tens of thousands of soldiers and dozens of cannons, but they were still unable to do anything to an army of 500 surrounded. Even though the enemy had advanced firearms, Wang Zhangjiang was still not afraid. No matter how advanced the firearms were, they still needed to be controlled by people. He didn't believe that the enemy would be able to hold on for long under continuous attacks. As long as he had the chance to get close, the human wave tactic would be effective, and it would be time for him to reap the fruits of victory. Once he killed Bugnam of Gojoseon, his reputation would definitely soar. At that time, who would dare to look down on him? When that time came, he would be the #1 hero in the world. With this thought in mind, Wang Zhangjiang felt quite excited, and the tiredness that he had felt for the past few days seemed to have lessened. While he was looking forward to it, the sky finally darkened. Wang Zhangjiang, who couldn't wait any longer, ordered the attack to begin as soon as the sky darkened. Fire arrows flew out one after another and flew towards the surroundings of the small courtyard. In order to ensure that everyone's vision was not obstructed, Wang Zhangjiang changed his strategy of fighting in the dark 2 nights ago. He prepared countless fire arrows in advance in order to illuminate the surroundings and find the weak points of the Black Cavalry's defense to find the best path to attack. Thousands of fire arrows suddenly flew up and landed around the small courtyard. Under the connected fire, the small courtyard was illuminated as if it was daytime. The trenches dug in the small courtyard also appeared in Wang Zhangjiang's sight. Good strategy, huh? Wang Zhangjiang laughed excitedly as he instantly understood the Black Cavalry strategy. During the day, the Black Cavalry used all kinds of methods to conceal themselves and only dug trenches. They only entered the trenches when it was dark. If they continued to attack in the dark, then even if they died in battle, no one would be able to figure out what method the Black Cavalry used. Now that the trenches were right in front of him, Wang Zhangjiang, who understood everything, had a better plan in mind. Men, prepare to light a fire and release smoke. Smoke attack was one of the most commonly used methods on the battlefield. In history, there were many records of victory through smoke attacks. However, because of the many limitations of this method of attack, although it was a good method, there were not many people who used it. But now, the Black Cavalry was surrounded within a certain range, so using smoke attacks was a good method. Under Wang Zhangjiang's order, the soldiers quickly carried dry firewood and lit it. Then, they continued to add wet firewood to the fire. Soon, smoke rose, and under the incessant fanning of the soldiers of the 3 provinces, the smoke began to blow towards the small courtyard. They're going to release smoke. With the help of the night vision device, Biyao Jiang, who was guarding the first line of defense, quickly discovered Wang Zhangjiang's intention. However, he did not panic. On the contrary, the corner of his mouth revealed a disdainful smile. At this moment, if Wang Zhangjiang could stand in front of him, he could not help but scold him for his stupidity. In front of long-range firearms, what was the effect of releasing smoke? Did they not know that all they needed to do was to land a shell on the pile of firewood to solve all the problems? Come on, where are the rocket launchers? Aim them at the pile of firewood and blow it up, Biyao Jiang said with a confident face. The rocket launchers beside him immediately got ready. Before the smoke could completely form, the rocket launchers were already fired at the small courtyard, raising the pile of firewood to the ground. Not only did the smoke not have any effect, but more than 10 people were killed or injured because of the rocket launcher. Wang Zhangjiang frowned. He was very curious about how the enemy could see his movements clearly when the sky was dark and the smoke was thick. Although it was the 16th day of the lunar calendar, the time when the moon was full, he shook his head. Shaking his head, he pushed the unhappiness in his heart to the bottom of his heart. Now was not the time to think about this. There was not much time left for him. If he could not take down Yang Qindong tonight, he was afraid that his head would be removed from his body. Men, beat the drums, charge. Under the illumination of the moonlight, accompanied by the flames everywhere, the soldiers of the 3 provinces began their suicidal charge. Just like a few days ago, the black shadows were everywhere. The soldiers of the 3 provinces pressed forward with a fearless look. Under the supervision of Wang Zhangjiang, the soldiers reluctantly charged forward. Open fire. The 500 black cavalry soldiers were naturally not going to be polite. With a shout, Biyao Jiang, who was in charge of the first line of defense, gave the order to open fire. In fact, after 2 days of fighting, the number of black cavalry soldiers was less than 500. To be precise, 13 soldiers were injured to varying degrees and could no longer participate in the battle. They could only stay in the main courtyard with Yang Qindong. Even so, the 487 black cavalry soldiers were armed with all kinds of advanced firearms. They were like a piece of metal, preventing the soldiers of the 3 provinces from approaching from all directions. Dense gunshots rang out, and the black shadows fell one by one. This battle made everyone realize the importance of weapons. When the weapons were advanced to a certain extent, it was already impossible to make up for it with manpower. The gunshots continued, and the casualties of the three provinces continued to increase. When the news reached the ears of General Wang Zhangjiang, he was calm like an old monk, and did not even frown. All of this was within his expectations. Although he did not understand where the black cavalry got the firearms and ammunition, he had no choice. In a battle of life and death, in order to give Zhu Huihua an explanation, even if he had to sacrifice all of his soldiers, so what? As long as he could get rid of Yang Qindong, all of this was worth it in his eyes. A general success was built on thousands of bones. At this moment, there was a clear reflection of the cruelty of war. Wang Zhangjiang personally supervised the battle. If any soldier wanted to retreat out of fear, once discovered, they would be killed without mercy. In this kind of battle where they would die regardless of whether they rushed forward or retreated, the soldiers had no choice. After getting used to obeying orders, they could only hope that they would be lucky enough to break through the blockade of the black cavalry and rush into the small courtyard. The soldiers of the three provincial armies, who had no other choice, showed the madness that they should have when they only had one path left to charge. Although the number of dead and injured soldiers kept increasing, after paying a huge price, they finally got closer and closer to the defending Black Knight Dragon Guards. When they were within an arrow's range, all kinds of bows and arrows began to fly, and the pressure began to increase. Chapter 1576. What's going on? Beat them back. Don't let any arrows threaten us. More and more arrows rained down on the trenches. Some of the black cavalry soldiers had already been hit by arrows. Although none of them were killed, more than a dozen soldiers were injured. Some of them even had their arms injured. This made it impossible for them to continue using their firearms in a short period of time. As Ba Daojiang shouted, a look of indignation appeared on his face. However, he didn't have a better idea. Tonight, the soldiers of the three provinces were rushing over without regard for their lives. Although the firearms in their hands were very powerful, they had limited manpower. There were less than 500 people, and they needed to guard the four directions. It was destined that the counterattack they could make was very limited. Fire 2 waves of grenades in a row. Beat back the enemies that are close to us. Captain Howling Blade had somehow arrived at Badao River and started shouting. Then, a wave of grenades was thrown in all directions. Cries of agony were heard one after another. Many of the soldiers from the three provinces who wanted to approach them were killed. The situation was stabilized again. Sigh. A heavy punch fell from the sky. Seeing that they were charging fearlessly, the opportunity to defeat the enemy had appeared. However, it was indeed a pity that they had failed because of a wave of grenades. However, Wang Zhangjiang wasn't discouraged. Since they had the opportunity just now, he believed that they would have a second chance if they continued to charge. He continued to give orders. The entire army charged forward without stopping. The battle in the inner circle was in full swing. Outside the small courtyard, the sound of gunfire and cannons had attracted more and more civilians. The appearance of the civilians wasn't that sudden. After all, the same sound had been heard for 2 consecutive nights. Anyone who wasn't deaf could hear it. The difference was that although these people were worried for the first 2 nights, they didn't do anything. But now, the civilians were making a move. From all directions, more than 15,000 civilians rushed towards the small courtyard. General Kai Wenju, who was in charge of the security of the outer circle, didn't look nervous at all. Perhaps this was due to inertia. In front of the army, the civilians were just livestock that could be driven around at will. Men, set up the formation. Archers, get ready. If the commoners dare to come close, shoot them down. Kai Wenju, who was riding on his horse, said calmly. Compared to the civilians who didn't have much fighting power, he was much more fortunate than Wang Zhangjiang, who could die at any moment in the inner circle. Cai Wenju had a calm expression on his face, but if he knew that a tenth of the 20,000 soldiers under him were Cold Vanguard warriors and thousands of new recruits had already been convinced by the Cold Vanguard warriors, he would not be able to remain so calm. As the saying goes, to catch bandits, first catch the ringleader. Cai Wenju didn't know that he had already become someone's target. Jianghu, the commander of the Cold Front Army's 1st Division and 1st Regiment, was currently hiding in the army, watching Cai Wenju's every move. Anyone who had been in the army knew that one was always the most powerful existence in an army. For example, in a company, if a company's first-grade officer died in battle, then the one to inherit their position would definitely be a platoon leader. Logically speaking, if the platoon-level officers all died in battle, the one who would inherit their positions would definitely be the platoon leader. This clearly showed the importance of this platoon leader. For Jianghu to be able to become the commander of an army's 1st Division and 1st Regiment, his ability was naturally not to be underestimated. Since he had his eyes on Cai Wenju, how could he escape from Jianghu's grasp when the enemy was in the open and Cai Wenju was in the dark? Attack! Seeing that the commoners were getting closer and closer, and that many of the soldiers from the 3 provinces had already started to knock their arrows, Jianghu, as the commander, shouted loudly. He drew his scimitar and charged towards Cai Wenju on his horse. With a shout, hundreds of Cold Vanguard warriors also drew their scimitars and charged towards Cai Wenju. They only had one target, General Cai Wenju on his horse. The formation suddenly became chaotic. Many of the soldiers from the 3 provinces didn't know what was going on. They only felt people charging past them, and if anyone dared to stop them, they would quickly be knocked to the ground and never be able to get up again. This sudden turn of events left many of the soldiers of the 3 provinces scratching their heads in confusion. Before they could figure out what was going on, Cai Wenju, who was riding on the horse, had his head chopped off. Blood sprayed everywhere. Jianghu's personal strength was naturally unquestionable. Just the number of Cold Vanguard warriors and officers trained by him numbered more than 1,000. Having fought with countless people, he had long trained himself to be invincible in close combat. Coupled with the fact that he was unprepared, it would be strange if Cai Wenju could escape. Without even having the time to react, the commander of the troops, Cai Wenju, was killed on his horse. When the other soldiers from the 3 provinces saw this scene, all of them turned pale with fright. More importantly, the person who killed the general was wearing the same uniform as them. This was the most frightening and inexplicable thing. Why did the soldiers dare to kill the general? If these people dared to kill the general, would they also dare to kill them? Put down your weapons and kneel on the ground. Otherwise, you will be killed without mercy. Waves of shouts came out one after another. More and more recruits with red cloth wrapped around their arms jumped out and shouted. The united front work done before finally played a decisive role at this moment. Jianghu's sudden attack and the active cooperation of his 4 battalion commanders, including Feng Zhan and Wang Jinlong, made the soldiers from the 3 provinces squat on the ground in confusion. Although they still didn't know what was going on, one thing was clear. If they didn't drop their weapons and squat on the ground now, they would die. This had been proven by the fact that their comrades had been killed for no reason just now. There were more and more civilians on the periphery, and the soldiers from the 3 provinces were getting closer and closer. Although there were nearly 100 spies from the Security Bureau encouraging everyone to act as the mainstay, when the soldiers from the 3 provinces were getting closer and closer, many civilians couldn't help but slow down. They were civilians and hadn't received any relevant military training. When facing regular soldiers with armor and swords, it would be a lie to say that they weren't nervous. But when they thought that if Bugnam of Gojoseon died in Yunnan Prefecture, the 5-star army would definitely take revenge. At that time, they would also be unable to escape death. Their confidence was strengthened a lot, and they didn't seem to be as scared as before. What's going on? Why isn't anyone shooting at us? Yeah, why do I see that many of these soldiers are squatting down? The distance was getting closer and closer. When they were less than 30 steps away, the civilians at the front finally saw the movements of the soldiers from the 3 provinces. The spies mixed in the crowd played a role at this time. Thinking of what the director said before, that someone would cooperate with them, how could they not know what was going on? Immediately, one by one, they shouted in the crowd, "The soldiers are mutinous. They are on the same side as us. Now, let's go with them and rescue Bugnam of Gojoseon." As soon as such shouts appeared, they rose and fell one after another without end. All the spies in the crowd also shouted in all directions, hoping to convey this fact to the ears of every civilian, so that they could move forward without worry. The fact that there were no arrows from afar was enough to explain everything. After knowing that the soldiers were like them and didn't want anything to happen to Bugnam of Gojoseon, the number of soldiers increased by a lot. They were no longer afraid, and each of them moved faster than before. There was a mutiny on the outside, and it wouldn't be long before it affected the inside. Under the attack from both sides, Wang Zhangjiang's fate was already sealed, and Yang Chendong's safety would naturally be guaranteed. It was at this time that Yang Chendong, to everyone's surprise, broke out from the east alone in a golden cloak. His body was like a fox, and he was as fast as a cheetah. This was the true portrayal of Yang Chendong's current situation. In the darkness, the golden cloak shone like a beacon. After he rushed out, he was locked on by many eyes. Golden cloak, that must be Bugnam of Gojoseon. Go after him. In the darkness, Muang, who was paying close attention to everything, like a viper lurking in the dark, had a flash of excitement in his eyes. He naturally saw the intensity of the battle just now. When he saw how the black cavalry relied on the advanced firearms in their hands to repel the attacks of the three provincial armies again and again, he was anxious and uneasy. After observing the battlefield, Muang came to the east. In his opinion, the defense here seemed to be weaker. If he had to launch an attack, he would definitely choose to attack here. Hiding in the east, he didn't know if the three provincial armies could break through the black cavalry's defense line if this continued. If they couldn't, once Yang Chendong walked out alive, who could restrain him? Where could they find such a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity? Yang Chendong must die. Otherwise, he would have to go and die. This was the military order he gave to his uncle, Pingshi Wang Mubin, before he came. With the military order in front of him, Muang was still thinking about whether to launch an attack in the chaos. The men he brought were men of sacrifice trained by the Mu family with great effort. In terms of skills, they were naturally not comparable to the ordinary soldiers of the three provincial armies. Even so, he was not 100% confident that he could bring 200 men of sacrifice to the black cavalry. While he was still struggling in his heart and unable to make a final decision, Yang Chendong rushed out. Especially when the other party deliberately stopped in the process of charging. With the help of the moon, they could see his face clearly. Needless to say, Muang was excited. Chapter 1577. He thought that this mission would be very difficult to complete, and the 200 men he brought with him would be thrown here. He never thought that Yang Chendong would actually rush out. Could it be that the black cavalry's defensive line was no longer safe? It's just that this is not what Muang should care about now. What he needs to do now is to catch up with Yang Chendong and kill him. Having seen the portrait of Yang Chendong countless times, Muang believed that he would not recognize the wrong person. Therefore, after Yang Chendong, who was wearing a golden cloak, rushed out from the east and kept running away, Muang took him and 200 men under him like ghosts in the night and chased after Yang Chendong. As soon as Muang moved, in the same darkness, the 100 ninjas also moved. For Yang Chendong's appearance and figure, even if he turned into ashes, Bujashi could not forget it. So in just a face-to-face, Bujashi could be 100% sure that the person who escaped was Yang Chendong. Even so, how could he let go of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity? Yang Chendong appeared, and he was still alone. His appearance also directly attracted the pursuit of 200 men of the Mu family and 100 ninjas. Besides, at this time, Yang Chendong, with the idea of being bold, rushed out from the protection of the black cavalry. The reason why he did this was that he wanted to lure the enemy into the trap, and secondly, doing this could also reduce the pressure on the black cavalry, so that he could go all out and fight without any scruples. It's just that when he really rushed out, Yang Chendong was not sure whether someone would chase after him or not. It wasn't until he met the soldiers of the 3 provinces who were charging at him from the outside, and used his body to quickly weave through them, that he heard the dense footsteps behind him. Only then did a relaxed smile appear on his face. With Yang Chendong's current skill, his hearing was naturally better than ordinary people. Just from the sound of those footsteps, he could feel that the strength of the people who came was definitely not comparable to the ordinary soldiers of the 3 provinces. From the orderly and light footsteps, Yang Chendong could feel that the other party's breathing was very stable. They should be the work of a well-trained master. Thinking that these people were masters, Yang Chendong couldn't help but rejoice in his actions. If it wasn't for this risk, the killers who waited for a long time and didn't have a chance to attack the small courtyard together with the soldiers of the 3 provinces. If so, the loss of the black cavalry would be inevitable. Come on, I hope you can keep up with my speed. After a smile that others couldn't see flashed across the corner of Yang Chendong's mouth, he stomped his feet on the ground and rushed forward again. With only 50% of his strength, Yang Chendong could keep a safe distance from the pursuers behind him. Yang Chendong led the way in front without any hurry. Behind him were the men of sacrifice led by Mu Ong and the ninjas led by Chueisho. As the 2 sides chased and fled, the distance between them and the small courtyard was getting farther and farther. Keep an eye on him, don't let him run away. Mu Ong was very excited at this time. When he spoke, he looked back, and then his eyes flashed with helplessness. Unlike Yang Chendong's skill, he could rush out of the encirclement of the 3 provinces without any injuries. When he led his men to break out of the encirclement, it took him some effort. The moment he collided with the soldiers of the 3 provinces, both sides were entangled for a short period of time. After sacrificing the lives of several men of sacrifice, he finally managed to kill his way out. This was because the soldiers of the 3 provinces were not prepared in the dark. Otherwise, Muong didn't dare to think about how many of the 200 men of sacrifice could escape alive. Now that several people have died, and all of this will fall on Yang Chendong's head, Muang's killing intent was even stronger at this time. Chueisho, who was 1 step behind them, was not any better. Just now, after a fierce battle, after losing the lives of several ninjas, they were able to rush out. Although they were reinforcements invited by Zhu Huihua, before their identity was announced, ordinary soldiers of the 3 provinces didn't know who they were. If they met on the battlefield, they were either comrades or enemies. Several ninjas died before they could catch up with the main character. Chueisho was also angry, but when he thought that he could finally catch Yang Chendong, his mood became excited again. He knew the importance of this battle. It will indicate whether the ninjas can be independent of Yangxia, and whether they have the opportunity to rebuild the small Japanese empire. And for this great goal, even if they use all their strength, even if they lose their lives, it is worth it. Both of them looked like they would not give up until they achieved their goal. The 2 teams followed Yang Chendong's footsteps closely and weaved through the southern cloud manor. Yang Chendong, who was walking in front, was undoubtedly the most relaxed person. If he wanted to, with his strength, he could easily get rid of the tail behind him, but he didn't do that. He wanted to see if there was a second force that wanted to take his life. In this way, one side fled while the other chased for about half an hour. Even when Yang Chendong felt tired, he still didn't find any new enemies. He knew that the dark forces in Yunnan Mansion were only these. He looked at the direction and went to the Xing Wang Temple in the east of the city. Xing Wang Temple, in the Great Ming Dynasty at that time, almost every town had one. It represented a kind of sustenance for the people. As the Xing Wang Temple of Yunnan Mansion, it covered a large area. It was equivalent to the size of a courtyard, and it was protected by a courtyard wall. It had its own independent courtyard. This was the cemetery Yang Chendong prepared for the people chasing behind him, and it was also the place where Yang Chendong prepared a backup plan. Just now, he had passed by it twice. He believed that the people who had been lying in ambush must have made all kinds of preparations. It was time to close the net. When he came to the Xing Wang Temple again, Yang Chendong flashed and jumped in the wall. His whole person disappeared into the darkness like a ghost. Following behind him were Muong and the others. Several men with good body skills also flew up, grabbed the courtyard wall and jumped in. Soon the door was opened from the inside, and more men rushed in from the door. Nearly 200 men rushed into the Xing Wang temple with the fastest speed, which made Ashiki, who followed closely behind, couldn't help but stop. He only stopped for a few seconds, and then he rushed in with nearly 100 ninjas. "Who are you people?" As soon as they entered the courtyard, a group of men turned around and surrounded Ashiki and the others. The ninjas were not willing to be outdone, and they all held their ninja swords in their hands, ready to fight at any time. During the pursuit, Muong knew that there was another group of pursuers behind him. However, he didn't know who these people were, so he didn't pay attention to them. After all, killing Yang Chendong was the most important task. But now, the two sides finally collided, and it was time for an explanation. "Don't be nervous, we are also looking for Bugnam of Gojoseon to take his life." Ishiki stepped forward and looked at Muong, who was nervous. This wasn't because Ishiki was afraid of Muong. In this dark night, although he didn't have the number of people, he was confident that he could win. It's just that he didn't forget that Yang Chendong was his target, and he didn't want to complicate things before that. How could Muong not think the same way? Although he didn't know the strength of his opponents, he didn't see them coming. However, when they saw him, they did not immediately attack him. This proved everything. They weren't Yang Chendong's subordinates, and with this, he won't be an enemy before completing the mission. Well, I will believe you for the time being. Now Yang Chendong is in this Xing Wang temple, let's look for him carefully. Muong stopped his men from attacking and turned around to go inside the Xing Wang temple. He had already arranged people to guard outside the temple. If Yang Chendong wanted to escape, he wouldn't be able to escape from his eyes. The two groups of people were divided into several teams, and they began to slowly move forward. They went to one temple after another, and it seemed like they were going to turn this place upside down to find Yang Chendong. In the dark, Yang Chendong's eyes had already been put on the most advanced night vision goggles, and he was watching Muong and Ashiki slowly approaching him. At this moment, Yang Chendong's eyes were filled with an inexhaustible anger, all because he saw Ashiki. Although the other party was dressed in black at this time, and there was a black mask on his face, but just like the other party could easily recognize him, he also recognized the other party. Ashiki is dead. He died in the assassination of Mandalatu. This is a well-known thing in Yangxia. But no one would have thought that in order to deter the world, Manto Rata hung all the assassins on the wooden pole to warn the world. Because of this action, the secret agents of the Security Bureau carefully examined the corpses, but they didn't find the leader of the ninja clan, Kuroshio Shinobi. When this information was reported to Yang Chendong, he was a little more vigilant. For this reason, he has taken some precautions, but at that time, Yang Chendong was still optimistic that Ashiki might have been burned, or he might have escaped with serious injuries and died. After all, he is a special ninja, and his strength is not comparable to ordinary people. This was just a kind of hope. However, when Chui Shi appeared in the Xing Wang temple, Yang Chendong knew that he had been too optimistic. This person is not dead, and he wants to kill him. Thinking that if he didn't save him, Ashiki would have died, and there would be no ninja today. And it was his own kindness that led to all of this. The anger in his heart couldn't be extinguished. Yang Chendong hates betrayal, especially after betrayal. They want to harm him. With this, there will be no good result for Ashiki today. Chapter 1578. Get ready to do it. In the end, Yang Chendong shook his head. He knew that those were just memories. Now, it was time to make up his mind to eradicate all of this. Yang Chendong, who seemed to have made some kind of decision, walked out of the darkness wearing a golden robe. As soon as he appeared, the death warriors of the Mu family and the Japanese ninjas who were searching for him couldn't help but exclaim, and then everyone quickly rushed forward and surrounded him. With the help of the torch in his hand, the entire courtyard of the Xing Wang temple was illuminated, and Yang Chendong's face also appeared in everyone's eyes. When he saw that it was indeed Yang Chendong, Muong was overjoyed. Previously, he had been worried that the person chasing him was fake and that he would fall for a trick to lure the tiger away from the mountain. But now, he could let go of his worries. On the other side, Blowing Stone, who was wearing a night suit, frowned. The person who came is Yang Qindong, and he is confident that he won't be wrong. But because of this, he couldn't help but mutter in his heart, the other party shouldn't have come out. 1 against 300, and such elite 300 people, even if they were made of iron, they wouldn't be their opponents, but why did he know that? Why did he come out? Why? Thinking of Yang Qindong's various means before, especially the last time when Ivan's sneak attack failed, and even the 30,000 cavalry led by Yeshen were destroyed, Blowing Stone's face suddenly became ugly. Could it be that this is a trap set by Yang Qindong? When he thought of Yang Qindong's past, for some reason, Blowing Stone had a feeling of panic. Although he glanced around and didn't find anything wrong, he was still very nervous at the moment. Unlike Yang Qindong's men, Muang at this moment appeared in front of Yang Qindong as a winner. "Oh, this should be King Wunan of Damyang. I'm Muang of the Mu family. I've been waiting for a long time." The Mu family of Shiping King? Yang Qindong wasn't surprised when he heard this. He just repeated it and chuckled. Then, he didn't pay any more attention to the other party. Instead, he looked at the area under the rock. "What? Friend, are you not going to introduce yourself? Even if you want my life, you should at least let me know who you are, right?" Yang Qindong was so calm that people who didn't know would think that this was his home ground. So when they heard this, many of the Mu family's death warriors and ninjas showed resentment on their faces. As ordinary ninjas, although they know that they once worked for Yang Xia, they don't know that everything they need for training, such as food, clothing, shelter, transportation, etc., was provided by Yang Qindong. They thought that the upper echelons had no choice but to lower their heads and submit to others in order to survive. In fact, several special ninjas like Kurosawa also said this to the people below. This caused everyone to look at Yang Qindong without the slightest bit of gratitude, only murderous intent and anger. But Chuisho is different from ordinary people, he knows everything. When he saw Yang Qindong's eyes looking at him, he knew that the other party already knows his identity, otherwise, he wouldn't question him in such a tone. When he thought about how he relied on Yang Qindong to develop and even lived until now, and it was because of Yang Qindong's help, he felt short of breath. Facing this question, he naturally didn't know how to answer. Chuisho didn't speak immediately, which caused Yang Qindong to laugh. "What's wrong? Could it be that all of you are mute? Or are you too ashamed to say your name and identity?" Yang Qindong deliberately said these words in Japanese. This is also his way of telling Chuisho that this king has already recognized his identity, and there is no point in hiding it anymore. Baka. What is he talking about? Is he looking down on us ninjas? At this time, those ninjas have already exploded, their dignity will never allow others to judge them like this. But they also know the importance of respect. At this moment, after most of the ninjas vented their dissatisfaction, they still looked at Chuisho, they want him to speak for them. He even spoke in Japanese. Chuisho knew that his identity has already been exposed. It's just that at this moment, he was no longer afraid, since he made such a choice, he must bear the consequences, so before he came, he was prepared to die, although he didn't think that this trip would be dangerous. Huh. After taking a deep breath and calming down, Chuisho finally spoke. "Bugnam of Gojoseon, long time no see, I am a special ninja of the Japanese Empire, Chuisho." It turned out to be a ninja. Muang, who saw everything from the side, couldn't help but be surprised. But soon the surprise was suppressed in the bottom of his heart. This time, he didn't want to be enemies with ninjas, but to kill Yang Qindong. As long as he can complete this task, it's just a small ninja whose country has been destroyed, he really doesn't put him in his eyes. "You finally dare to admit your identity? But why don't you call yourself a servant? And what Japanese empire did you say? Ha ha ha, wasn't it destroyed a long time ago? Now it's just a province of Yang Xia." Yang Qindong waited for Chuisho to admit his identity, then he couldn't help but laugh, his words were full of sarcasm and contempt. In the past, these ninjas under the rock claimed to be slaves in front of Yang Qindong, and even if he wanted, these people claimed to be lackeys. But now, these small titles proved their ambition. In the face of these sarcastic words, the other ninjas who understood Chinese naturally couldn't stand it. They all looked at Chuisho angrily. Chuisho wasn't much better. If it was just him and Yang Qindong here, he would just listen to some of these words. But now there are so many ninjas here, he absolutely won't allow anyone to question and disrespect him, so at this moment he suddenly shouted back. Bugnam of Gojoseon, the past is the past, please speak with dignity. Dignity, bah. Yang Qindong opened his mouth and spat. A group of people who are willing to be dogs in order to survive, you want others to respect you, you think too highly of yourselves. Let me tell you, a dog is a dog, even if it's wearing clothes, it's just a pet called by the master. In the face of a master who gives you food and drinks, you have to learn to wag your tail and beg, not to be treated with equal respect like a human, because you don't deserve it. After saying these words, it didn't seem to be enough. Yang Qindong continued to say. If it wasn't for this king, you would already be dead. How could you have your current scale? Without this king's money, how could you recruit people and train them wholeheartedly? Do you really think you can deny everything just because you've eaten everything? Facing Yang Qindong's questioning, Chuisho opened his mouth several times to say something, but in the end, he didn't say anything. Yang Qindong was right. If it wasn't for his pity and help, they would have already been killed by the samurai of the Japanese Empire. They wouldn't have been able to survive until now, let alone develop and grow stronger. They were once their benefactors, but now they don't want to repay him, they want to kill their master. What they did was indeed a bit too much. After venting for a while, Yang Qindong's mood seemed to be better. He opened his mouth and said, all right, let the past go with the wind. Since you have chosen to be enemies with this king, then there's no meaning in saying those things. Now that you have found this king and want to kill this king, can you tell me who ordered you to do this? Oh, don't say no. If you want to train ninjas, without enough money, it's impossible. Don't try to fool this king. With a change of topic, Yang Qindong placed the question on the person behind the scenes. This was also the answer that Yang Qindong desperately wanted to know. Wasn't the reason why he took such a risk on this trip for this answer, to find out who the traitor was? Yang Qindong didn't mention the past, he just wanted to know who ordered them to do it. This request was already very low. Before a prisoner died, they were allowed to eat a full meal, not to mention Yang Qindong, who was their benefactor. But he just wanted to know who was behind the scenes. This was not too much. If Chuishiki knew the answer, he would tell Yang Qindong. But unfortunately, he really didn't know. Chuishiki shook his head. Bugnam of Gojoseon, it's not that Chuishiki doesn't want to tell you, I really don't know, I only know to listen to Mo Gui's orders. Mo Gui? Who is he? Although Yang Qindong was somewhat dissatisfied with this answer, he also knew that Chuishiki really didn't know, otherwise, he wouldn't refuse to answer this question. I don't know who he is, I just know everything, I just listened to him. By the way, he should be in the palace of the 3 provinces now, beside the 3 provincial kings. It's a pity, I'm afraid that Bugnam of Gojoseon will never see him again. Chuishiki said while shaking his head, as if he was going to die here today. He was destined to not know the result. Mo Gui, right? I'll remember this name. Yang Qindong nodded heavily, as if he attached great importance to this name. Seeing that Yang Qindong was still hesitating about this matter, seeing that Chuishiki seemed to have answered his question, and seeing that it was getting late, Muang laughed loudly. Well, Bugnam of Gojoseon, you should know everything you need to know, now you shouldn't have any last wishes, it's time to go on the road. Go on the road? With just you? You're just a small child of the Mu family. Do you know that I'm Bugnam of Gojoseon, the emperor of the Great Ming Dynasty, recognized by the emperor of the Great Ming Dynasty, Bai Ming, and the emperor of the Southern Ming Dynasty? Do you know that you're offending your superiors by doing this to me? Seeing that Chuishiki couldn't ask any more questions, Yang Qindong turned his gaze to Muang. Chapter 1579. Muong had never experienced Yang Chendong's methods. He had only heard about them, so Muong was not afraid of him. Seeing that Yang Chendong still wanted to use his position to oppress others, Muong could not help but burst into laughter. Ha ha ha, Bugnam of Gojoseon? The emperor personally conferred the title? Don't you think it's ridiculous to say this? Don't you know that all this is because you were forced to do so? You're just a courtier. Instead of thanking the emperor for his kindness, you only want to rebel and become the emperor. Now you still have the face to talk about these principles. Don't you feel ashamed? Muong's scolding attracted a burst of cheers from the men of sacrifice around him. Although they had not made a move yet, it was obvious that their young master Mu was much better than the special ninja of the Japanese Empire. This was something they should be proud of. Yang Chendong listened to all this carefully, and there was no trace of unhappiness on his face. This was because he knew that Muong wasn't the only one who thought this way. Most of the officials of the Great Ming Dynasty were also thinking this way. This was everyone's intuition about him. He really needed to understand it. It was a pity that Muong's eloquence was only a so-so. After saying this, he shut up. Perhaps he was disappointed that he did not see Yang Chendong flying into a rage, so he lost interest. Why don't you continue? Yang Chendong, on the other hand, didn't seem to have heard enough and asked such a question. This really angered Muong. He had never seen such a thick-skinned person. For a moment, he did not know what to say. He simply did not answer. Instead, he clenched the long sword in his hand and shouted, "What's there to say to a dying man?" "Oh, I see." Yang Chendong nodded as if he understood, but then shook his head. "I gave you a chance to vent your dissatisfaction. If you don't want to say it, then there's really no chance. However, I have to warn you that your actions will bring disaster to the entire Mu family and Shiping King. I hope you won't regret it when you meet in the netherworld." Regret? You should be the one regretting it. At the very least, you should die before us. Men, do it. Muong didn't want to say anything else. Perhaps because he couldn't see Yang Chendong's fear, Muong felt that it was unnecessary to say anything. It would be better to take him down and cut him into 1,000 pieces. That's right, we should do it. Do it. As Muong's voice fell, Yang Chendong actually nodded in agreement, and then said the same thing. Then, the sound of a dying person wailing could be heard. This voice made Muong and Bao Shi, who were about to make a move, freeze. They couldn't help but stop moving forward. Bang! The closed door of the temple behind them was suddenly knocked open from the outside. Then, a group of black figures jumped in and blocked the direction of the door. Not only that, at the same time, on the courtyard wall, a group of men in black rushed out from behind Yang Chendong. As soon as they appeared, they surrounded Muong and Bao Shi. The sudden change shocked Muong and Chui Ishida. Their expressions were no longer as relaxed as before. The men of sacrifice sent by the Mu family were all very strong. If they were fighting on the battlefield, any one of them would not be afraid of 3 to 5 people. But those shouts just now were so quick that they almost didn't hear any sound of resistance. They were killed one after another. From this point of view, doesn't it mean that this person's skills were more powerful than theirs? The stronger the enemy, the more dangerous their situation would be. It would be strange if they didn't have a good expression. The only thing worth rejoicing over was that although it seemed like they were surrounded, it was clear that not many people had come. There were only a little over 100 people, which was not even half of their number. It seemed that with the advantage of numbers, they still had a fighting chance. Seemingly at the same time, Muong and Blowing Stone's eyes met. Then, almost at the same time, they opened their mouths and said the word, "kill." They were fast, but some people were faster than them. Those men in black who suddenly appeared, they didn't know when they had the 95 style gun in their hands. Just when those men of sacrifice and ninjas were about to move, a black muzzle was pointed at them, and then there was a burst of fierce gunshots. The bullets flashed in the dark night, and ninjas and men of sacrifice who wanted to rush forward were shot down one by one. Firearms? When they saw the men in black took out these things, whether it was Mu Ong or Bao Shi, their face changed. A strong sense of crisis also pressed down on them, making their originally confident faces lose their confidence. Retreat. Go. Almost one after the other, Bao Shi and Mu Ong gave the order. In their view, although they had the advantage in numbers, in the face of powerful firearms, it was too difficult to win. In that case, it was better to escape first. Anyway, Yang Chendong was still in Yunnan Mansion, so they didn't have to worry about not finding an opportunity to kill him. It's just that at this time, they still wanted to retreat, but it was not so easy. A smoke bomb was thrown at them, the strong smoke exuded a nauseating smell, and their eyes couldn't help but shed tears of pain. In a short time, most people were hit and lost the ability to resist. Throw the flash bomb. Another voice came out, followed by a series of hand grenades that could blind people's eyes. They were thrown in the courtyard, making those men of sacrifice who wanted to escape in the dark, especially the ninjas, have no choice but to stop. Forget about the men of sacrifice. Their advantage was that they were not afraid of death. When their strength was obviously inferior, they were just like straws that could be harvested at any time. Ninjas were different. What they were good at was hiding, or sneaking, or running away with the help of various means. Whether it was using the surrounding environment or the reflection and refraction of light, in short, when it came to escaping, few people dared to say that they were the best. Not to mention in the originally dark environment, as long as they couldn't be killed in the first place, once they escaped, it would be extremely difficult to catch them. It was precisely because they knew and understood this that those flash bombs were thrown out. When a strong light suddenly came out and met the eyes of those ninjas, at that moment, they felt that there was a vast expanse of white in front of them. At this moment, they completely lost their direction, let alone escape. When the flash bombs appeared, the men in black with special goggles moved. They had been trained for this for a long time, and with the protection of the goggles, the flash bomb's damage to them has been minimized. One side couldn't see anything, and the other side's vision was normal, so it was easy to imagine what would happen. The sound of gunshots came out, hitting the legs of the men of sacrifice or ninjas one after another. Soon, the Xing Wang temple was dyed red with blood, and a burst of fishy smell also assailed their nostrils, making them want to vomit. Vomit. Those assassins who first experienced the smoke bombs, then the flash bombs, and then the smell of blood finally couldn't stand it anymore. They began to bend down, lowered their heads, and vomited. But even if they had lost the power to resist in a short time, the gunshots still didn't stop. One by one, their legs were penetrated by bullets, and blood flowed out. One by one, they couldn't stand still and fell to the ground. In a short time, the assassins who wanted to resist and break out of the encirclement stopped moving. They fell to the ground one by one, wailing and screaming. At the same time, their bodies were twitching. They didn't know if it was because of the gunshot wounds or because of the smell in their noses. They kept twisting their bodies in pain. Control them all. Seeing that the dust had settled, the group of black-clothed men stopped. One by one, they lit up their torches and began to walk towards the injured assassins on the ground. Fight them to the death. When a black-clothed man came to the side of a death warrior, a sudden shout resounded. Then, a figure endured the pain from his legs and suddenly pounced on him like a ferocious tiger coming down from the mountain. His momentum was extraordinary. You're courting death. The man in black with a torch in his right hand seemed to have expected this scene to happen. He just moved his body to the side and dodged the tiger's attack. Then, when the assassin's figure missed, a torch hit the assassin's back. Under the powerful force, the assassin spat out another mouthful of blood. This time, he completely fainted. This scene continued to happen. Men of sacrifice were men of sacrifice. They kept fighting back. Although they had lost the support of their legs, they still fought back. However, those men in black all seemed to have unique skills. Not only were none of them injured, but they all used a single move to subdue the killers who were still unwilling to give up. Once again, they knocked them unconscious on the ground. Among them, the most obvious one was the man in black who fought against Muang. Muang was allowed to lead the team. Needless to say, his skills were excellent. Therefore, although his legs were penetrated by bullets just now, he did not give up the last chance. When he endured the pain in his legs, he jumped up and rushed toward the man in black. He was full of confidence that his sneak attack would succeed. Although he did this, he still could not avoid the result of death. But it was probably the best result to be able to drag one of them down with him before he died. Although it was said that it would be faster if it was late, when he really attacked, Muang was disappointed again. The moment he flew up, he felt that something was wrong. Then he found that in the face of his absolute counterattack, his opponent did not panic. He even saw the disdain in his opponent's eyes under the moonlight. Then, facing his fierce attack, his opponent did not dodge. On the contrary, his opponent met his attack head-on with his left fist without a torch. You're tuning in to the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.